Oh look, there's a giant blob heading straight for New York City. Oh wait, hold on. You'll actually have to look down, not up. Because this blob is a mass of hot rock moving beneath the Earth's surface. And when it finally reaches the Big Apple, some say it could tear the continent in two. But Yankees fans, and even you Mets fans, don't worry, this journey is going to take about 15 million years or so. You see, a long time ago, people noticed something curious. When they looked at world maps, they thought, don't the continents look like puzzle pieces that could fit together? That couldn't just be a coincidence, right? Then, in the year 1912, a German meteorologist named Alfred Wegener came up with a revolutionary idea, something we now know as the theory of continental drift. Wegener said the continents are always on the move, and those huge chunks of land we see today were all once connected, forming one giant supercontinent called Pangaea. That idea suddenly explained a lot of mysteries, like why fossils from the same species turn up in different corners of the world, even though entire oceans lie between them, or why coastlines of continents match up so neatly, just like South America and Africa. Wegener also explained that mountains form when a drifting continent runs into another one, crumpling the land and pushing it upward. That is exactly how the Himalayas came to be. The Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate, and the land rose into the massive mountain range we see today. Now these days, everybody learns about Wegener's idea in school and takes it as fact. But back then, many people thought he was completely out of his mind. I mean, whole continents moving around? What on earth could push them? That's why it took scientists more than 50 years to finally go, oh, I see, it's the Earth's mantle. Yep, slow-moving currents of hot rock deep in the Earth's mantle push the tectonic plates around, and that means the continents move too. Picture super tough puzzle pieces floating on top of boiling oatmeal. That's a picture. Yep, they drift, and sooner or later they crash into each other. This is what happens on Earth's surface. And that's how we finally agreed that Wegener was right. But what if I told you that might not always be the case? Some experts agree that the supercontinent Pangaea started breaking apart about 200 million years ago. And that's how we ended up with the world map we know today. But a recent study is challenging part of that idea. And it all comes down to a giant mass of hot rock, something scientists call the Northern Appalachian Anomaly, or just NAA. Yep, what we casually call a blob, the experts call an anomaly, and that is simply because it is hotter than the rock around it. So this anomaly sits about 124 miles beneath the mountains of New England and stretches up to 249 miles wide. It lies in the asthenosphere, the semi-molten layer of Earth's upper mantle. But here's the strange part. It should not even be there. I mean, rock formations like this normally don't exist in that part of Earth's interior. For years, scientists thought the anomaly was left over from when the North American continent broke apart from Northwest Africa about 180 million years ago. This new study says that might not be the case. It suggests the blob is actually linked to the process that split Greenland from North America only about 80 million years ago. The idea then is that this blob is a leftover from when the landmass broke apart, a piece that never quite settled down. This is one stubborn blob we're talking about because it is still on the move, super slowly. But still, it moves only about 12 miles in a million years. Over time, it's already traveled more than 1,100 miles from where it first appeared. And now, New Yorkers, watch out! This blob of scorching hot rock is heading your way. Okay, I know, I'm being a little dramatic. The truth is, we really don't have to worry. First, scientists say it won't even get near the city for at least 15 million years. And second, even though we call it a blob, it is not something gelatinous. It is not oozing. And it is definitely not going to push its way up through the Earth's crust and invade the New York subway, or anything like that. That is just not going to happen. What the anomaly will look like, or what it might do to the continent in the future, is still a mystery for geologists. But they are pretty confident it will not have any real impact on human infrastructure or on our daily lives. it is not like lava that's suddenly going to burst through the floor of your house. That's because, at the end of the day, the blob is just rock, like any rock you see on the street, only super high, enormous, and buried deep inside the earth. To explain why this rock is sitting in such a weird spot, scientists came up with what they call the mantle wave theory. So think of it kind of like a lava lamp. After continents break apart, hot, heavy rock can detach from the bottom of the tectonic plates in blobs. These blobs, or pieces of rock, move around under the crust and create waves. When that hot material slips under a continent, it works like the flame under a hot air balloon. It gives the land a little lift. Then, when continents stretch and split, space opens up underneath and semi-molten rock quickly fills in. Eventually, it cools down, gets heavier, and sinks. Meanwhile, hotter mantle material rises up and creates a warm patch called a thermal anomaly. This sudden motion shakes up the base of the continent. Imagine a row of dominoes. One piece falls and the rest follows. Blobs of rock start dripping downward one after another, and over time, they slowly move inland. Scientists think these rock currents keep flowing, rippling under the surface for millions of years. Now, knowing all this matters because the anomaly might have played a role in shaping the land above it. For example, it may have lifted up some ancient mountains over the past few million years. That helps to explain a big mystery of the region: why the Appalachians are still standing. I mean, why haven't they worn down as much as you would expect after all this time? Well, think about it. The Appalachians are ancient. This mountain range in North America started forming hundreds of millions of years ago, long before the dinosaurs. With all that time, rain, wind, and erosion should have worn them down to almost nothing by now. Honestly, some geologists expected them to be rolling hills at best. But nope, they're still mountains, pretty ones too, and much bigger than they should be. And here's where the blob comes in. See, when a giant pocket of superhot rock sits under a mountain range, it can actually give the crust a little lift. It's kind of like putting a balloon under a blanket. The blanket rises up. The heat makes the Earth's crust lighter. So even while wind and rain are wearing the mountains down from above, the Earth is gently pushing them back up from below. There is another positive takeaway from this study. These new insights can help scientists better understand other strange geological features around the world. In fact, the researchers believe they may have already found a twin to this blob, sitting under north-central Greenland and also tied to the Labrador Sea. So, what can we conclude from all this? Well, tectonic plate movement is still the reasons continents break apart. But the process goes much deeper than we thought. The effects of ancient rifting can still play out millions of years after the surface split, just like what happened in Greenland. Although it's still really hard to predict what this anomaly will look like in the future, we know one thing for sure right now: there is nothing to fear, and I'm betting that most of us won't be around for that.
Is the Big Apple getting a little too heavy for its own good? A recent study revealed that New York City is sinking. And get this, it's all because of those towering skyscrapers. Apparently, the whole event is called subsidence, which is when the Earth's surface settles bit by bit, or suddenly sinks. Soft sediments shifting and the weight of the city itself are the culprits behind this sinking sensation. Now, don't get too alarmed. The study found that New York is sinking at a rate of 0.04 to 0.07 inches per year. Sure, that doesn't sound like much, but there are parts of the city that are sinking even faster than that. This sinking situation could cause some trouble for the city, especially since it's already pretty low-lying and home to over 8 million people. So it's important that local authorities come up with some strategies to tackle the growing flood risk and rising sea levels. Although, I'm not sure building giant seawalls is the way to go. We might need to get a little more creative than that. Geologists want to make sure we're all aware that building more high-rises near the coast, rivers, or lakes could contribute to future flood risks. So we really need to think twice before we start constructing skyscrapers left and right. In recent studies, scientists calculated the total mass of all the buildings in New York City, over 1 million of them, and it adds up to a whopping 1.68 trillion pounds. Talk about a heavy load. Now, they didn't include the weight of the roads, sidewalks, bridges, and other paved areas, so you can only imagine how much more weight is added to the city. But hey, even with these limitations, the researchers did a pretty good job of accounting for the complex geology beneath New York, including the sand, silt, clay deposits, and good old bedrock. They found out that certain types of soil, like clay and artificial fill, are more prone to subsidence. On the other hand, bedrock stays pretty firm and keeps those skyscrapers in place. So at least we don't have to worry about the Empire State Building taking a dive anytime soon. Comparing their fancy models with satellite data, the researchers created a map of the city showing where the sinking is happening. And guess what? The increased urbanization and all that groundwater pumping and draining are only making things worse. It's high time we start protecting our resources, don't you think? I wouldn't start packing my bags just yet. New York isn't the only sinking city out there, you know. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is facing some serious sinking action too. In fact, parts of it could be underwater by 2050. That's like a real-life Atlantis situation. Over 30 million people in Jakarta are now deciding if they should relocate the entire city. If there's a city out there we should worry about sinking, that's Venice for sure. But why is it so eager to take a dive, you might ask? Well, let me tell you the complex truth. You see, Venice decided to set up shop on a marshy lagoon with shoddy foundations. As time went by, the ground underneath just couldn't hold it together and started compacting like a squished marshmallow. On top of that, the city's been slurping up groundwater like it's going out of style or something. The cherry on top of this mushy cake is that the sea levels have also been slowly rising. And guess what? Those sneaky plate tectonics are having a laugh by shoving the Adriatic plate under the Apennine Mountains, giving Venice an extra push downward. Someone had the bright idea to stop pumping groundwater, thinking they could stop the sinking shenanigans. But hold your gondolas. A new study revealed that the sinking hasn't completely stopped, just slowed down a bit. It turns out the whole area is tilting ever so slightly to the east, with Venice perched on the slightly higher end. You must be wondering how much Venice sinks in a year, right? Brace yourself for this shocking revelation. It's sinking at a rate of about 0.04 to 0.07 inches a year, similar to New York. At this pace, in the next 20 years, it could sink a whopping 3 inches below sea level. To avoid turning into a Venetian fishbowl, locals are frantically building special barriers to keep the water from crashing into the lagoon. But don't hold your breath, because this project has had more delays than you'd expect. Oh, and have you noticed that charming old-style vibe in Venice? It's not just because they're fans of the vintage look. Those salty waters have been wreaking havoc on the buildings, thanks to the water levels constantly breaching the original damp proofing. Now the water's cozying up to the masonry, and the ground floors of many apartments are no longer safe enough to live in. Now, when will Venice take a dive into the abyss? It's hard to say for sure. Subsidence and rising sea levels are as slow and unpredictable as a turtle in a marathon. But experts have playfully warned that if things continue as they are, Venice could be doing the backstroke beneath the waves by 2100. Fear not, though. They're doing their best to protect this floating gem of history and culture from becoming a Hollywood disaster flick. So don't cancel that Venice day trip just yet. New Orleans has a peculiar watery situation going on too. You see, this lively place was initially built just a smidge above sea level, and now it's gradually sinking. Back in the day, when an area of the city called the French Quarter was just popping up, folks had to make do with what they had. They scored the best land they could find, but it was only about 10 feet above sea level. And let's not forget, the rest of the city is as flat as a pancake, with the areas around the French Quarter being just a hair lower. Now, even though they knew they were up against some soggy odds, the resourceful New Orleans residents did their best to elevate their houses above the flood-prone land they chose as their home. There's more. The ground beneath New Orleans is as wobbly as a plate of Jell-O. Architects had to keep things short and sweet because they feared the soil couldn't handle the weight of taller structures. They played it safe, sticking to 2 or 2.5 stories. Here's where it gets interesting. The city installed a fancy drainage system in the 1900s, thinking it would solve their water woes. And while it did help with the marshes and all, it inadvertently sucked the life out of the soil. Yep, the ground was left high and dry, without enough sediment and water to keep it steady. As a result, those former marshes sank as if they were in a quicksand competition. By the 1930s, things got even more topsy-turvy. 1/3 of the city was below sea level, and by the time Hurricane Katrina made its grand entrance, that number skyrocketed to around 50%. Oh, and here's the icing on the cake. Sea levels decided to join the party, rising faster than a helium balloon. So now, not only is New Orleans sinking, but the surrounding area is also at various degrees below sea level. So what can we do about all these sinking cities? Well, for instance, we could manage our water consumption a bit better. We can't just keep sucking groundwater out of the earth like there's no tomorrow. We've got to find new ways to quench our urban centers' thirst. Think about it. We could purify surface waters, or even turn salty seawater into a sweet solution. Of course, we'll need a boatload of energy to make it all work. Speaking of great urban water management, let me tell you about a town in Denmark called Nye. These guys have got it all figured out. They collect rainwater and use it to supply their toilets and washing machines. Talk about resourcefulness. Now that's what I call a splash of genius.
It was hot in the tropics, a type of heat unknown to the men aboard the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria ships, led by Italian explorer Christopher Columbus. It had been months since these men left their home cities in Europe, and until then, Europe was all they knew. They were given a difficult and even dangerous task. Spain hired Columbus to find a new western route to Asia. They needed new routes for trading and buying spices, but it was far from a simple job. I mean, crossing the ocean never is. Little did those sailors know that their lives were about to change forever. "Land in sight!" someone must have shouted on board. But when they finally stepped on that new foreign land, they discovered they were not in Asia. They had landed in the Americas. You've probably heard this tale before. Historically speaking, Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492. But what would have happened if Columbus's ship had faced a lethal storm in the Atlantic Ocean and had never made it to the new land? What would today's history look like? First things first, nobody discovered anything. When we say that the Americas were discovered, we're kind of ignoring the millions of people who already lived there. You see, the Americas were only discovered from Europe's point of view. Columbus would only have discovered something if when he got there, he was faced with acres and acres of empty land. But that was not the case at all. Second, Columbus was not the first explorer to land in the Americas. Believe it or not, the Vikings approached American shores in the 10th century. Their expeditions have been well documented and accepted by scholars. Here's what might have happened. Around the year 1000 CE, Viking explorer Leif Erikson sailed to a place called Vinland. Cute name, huh? It's now a region in Canada called Newfoundland. But his crew didn't stay too long. They arrived to find 10 Native Americans napping under their overturned canoes. They attempted some trade, but I'm guessing the Vikings weren't too friendly and the Americans didn't really like them. The Vikings' account of the encounter shows they felt outnumbered and menaced, so they sailed away back to their land. That makes sense, right? As I said earlier, there were millions of people living in the ginormous continent of the Americas. Any foreigner would be outnumbered there. Now take a look at what North America looked like before our buddy Chris got there. It was not divided into the normal states we're used to. And if Columbus had never arrived, the United States would probably never have been united to begin with. After all, there were hundreds of first Americans living in these lands, and they lived amongst their own tribes, quite different from the Europeans. It's not accurate to think that there were no political systems going on in the Americas before Europeans arrived. We just need to understand that they were different from what we're used to today. When Europeans arrived, they imported their belief systems with them, from religious beliefs and language systems to things as simple as clothing habits. If the Americas had developed on their own, maybe their sense of fashion would be completely different today. You see, Europeans had a developed sense of fashion by the time they arrived in the West. They wore things such as this and this. But those don't really work in the tropics, do they? For them, fashion had to do with showing a certain economic status, while in the Americas, that didn't exist. For Native Americans, clothing was mainly functional and related to the weather. In warmer climates, Native people would wear short-like cloths to cover their intimate parts. They would walk bare-chested and use shoes known as moccasins. Yes, similar to the moccasins you probably own. In colder climates, they would resort to using leather and fur parkas. Of course, there was always the special clothing used for ceremonial purposes. So I'm guessing that if Columbus never reached the Americas, brands such as the Gap, Hollister, and Forever 21 would have never existed. But we could live with that, couldn't we? Here's a wild thought. Let's say that by the 1700s, Native Americans had developed complex engineering skills. They built big boats, maybe a bit smaller in size than the traditional European ships, and decided to venture across the ocean. Let's say they were the ones who arrived on European shores, in places such as Spain and Portugal. They carried gifts and goods with them for trading, of course. This was also a common practice amongst them back home, known as potlatch. Sure, they were received with suspicion by the Europeans, who had only ever traded with Asia. But with this inverted encounter, a different type of relationship began between Native Americans and Europeans. Since Europeans didn't claim ownership of the Americas, the people from the so-called New Land weren't considered inferior to them. Actually, they stood side by side as equals, each one with their own power and set of knowledge. Native Americans taught Europeans a new type of ruling system, a more decentralized one. So modern-day structures of government would look really different. Maybe Europeans decided that 4 years was a long time for someone to hold decision power, so they implemented smaller and more frequent elections. Oh, and the landscape of European cities also changed a lot. Instead of huge statues made of copper and bronze showing men in ships on their way to the Americas, the Europeans built totem poles in honor of their alliances with first Americans. In terms of medical and medicinal knowledge, they had a lot to exchange about. While Europeans were making advances in traditional medicine, Americans had developed an impressive knowledge of herbs that could heal a series of things. Before they knew it, Europeans were selling different varieties of plants in their pharmaceutical establishments. They had one big barrier though: language. Since Europeans never arrived on American shores, they also never taught their language to Americans. So maybe in this scenario, both cultures brought in their best linguists and tried creating a new language from scratch. Something that could be comprehensible from both perspectives and that could encompass both of their worldviews. The implications of this on modern-day life would be really profound if you stop to think about it. Let's say that this newly created language involved some symbols and drawings in it. You see, Native Americans often told stories using symbols known as pictograms. They were quite literal sometimes. As you can see, a mountain was represented by, well, a mountain. It's crazy to think that this system of communication has been around for 5,000 years. since it was actually invented by the Sumerians. And hey, maybe even our laptop keyboards would come equipped with these symbols, and you could write more visually hybrid and fun emails than the ones you write today. The American landscape would have also changed. You see, if neither Columbus nor any of the other European dudes that went after him reached the so-called New Land, Central and Latin American cities would look completely different than they do today. Maybe the bustling empires of the time, such as the Inca, the Maya, and the Aztec, would have grown immensely. To be fair, they were already pretty big by the time Europeans got there. Some pre-Columbian Maya cities were as big as medieval London and Paris in terms of population. But oh my, the Mayan Empire would have grown so much that it could have spread out all over of Central America. They could have developed their pyramid building craft up to the point that they managed to build an even larger pyramid than the Giza pyramid in Egypt. So tourists would come from all over the world to visit. And in South America, let's just say the region could have turned into a huge forest, bigger than the Amazon. The Inca could have spread through the Andes and then into the mainland. Places such as Brazil and Argentina never existed. But in their place, there would have been dreamy tropical settlements, which would have become a worldwide reference in sustainable living.
The authorities in a town in northwestern Poland decided to build an observation tower in a public park. Nothing special about that, right? It wasn't until a local archaeologist started digging. It seemed that he had found remains of a fort, but not just any fort. The legendary Jomsborg, or as people also call it, the Viking medieval New York. It's not unusual for Viking finds to pop up in this area. Archaeologists have suspected for a long time that the Polish island near Germany could be the site of the legendary city, and the locals believe in this too. Every year they hold the continent's biggest Viking festival there. People dress up and reenact the Vikings' way of life. The time period I'm talking about is the 10th century. Scholars believe Jomsborg thrived back then, if it was even real, and that's a big if. The mystery has been going on for more than half a millennium. The two most important questions troubling historians are whether the Viking stronghold was real and where it was located. The first historical records that mention the town can be traced back to the 12th century. Recently, a golden disc appeared in Sweden. It contained the names of Jomsborg and Harold Bluetooth. Does the man's last name sound familiar? That's because the Bluetooth technology we use today was named after him. He was a Danish king who apparently ruled over Jomsborg as well, and historians know he lived in the 10th century, right around the time the Viking legendary city reached its peak. All the historical sources we have lack one thing: the city's exact location. Ancient texts describe Jomsborg as a vibrant trading post that grew around a fortress. It had thousands of residents and a pier for ships to dock. This settlement should be somewhere along the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. Just the Polish section of the coastline is more than 4 times longer than the Grand Canyon. The city could be anywhere within the medieval Wendland. Today, this region is split between Germany and Poland, and it's called Pomerania. Luckily for archaeology buffs, there are clues. The Polish city with the newly discovered fort lies near a lagoon. According to ancient sources, the legendary city had room for hundreds of ships. Sagas put the total number of vessels at 360. These are Old Norse epics in prose. A lagoon is the perfect place to moor a large fleet. The waters here are calm. There are no big waves like in the open sea. Speaking of the sea, some historians believe that the city now lies underwater. According to them, the site was located off the northwest coast of Eustom Island. Today, this area is submerged under the Baltic Sea. Let's say Jomsborg really existed. Who lived there? The name of the inhabitants is not very imaginative: Jomsvikings. These people are just as mysterious as their fabled city. They are mentioned in sagas and legends. And there are a couple of rune stones, those are raised stones with runic letters, that mention battles they took part in. Runes were a writing system used by Germanic peoples, including the Vikings, before they adopted the Latin script. And that's pretty much it. There's no hard archaeological evidence that would prove Jomsvikings ever existed. If these myths and legends turn out to be true, then Jomsborg really resembled New York. All nationalities with historical ties to the region lived there: Germans, Slavs, and Vikings. Now keep in mind that a Viking wasn't a nationality but more of a profession. The hotspot of Viking activity was present-day Sweden and Denmark. A lot of Vikings had Scandinavian origins, but not all of them. In terms of genes, they were a mixed bunch. Scientists even found evidence that some Vikings came from southern Europe, but none of them wore those helmets with horns. We owe that image to 19th century operas. The real Vikings had simple iron helmets with a prominent nose guard. The Jomsvikings were sort of a brotherhood, and in any tight-knit community, members had to obey certain rules. One of them stated that you had to be brave. This meant that if your opponent is not bigger than you and didn't have better fighting tools, you weren't allowed to flee the scene. Sounds a bit far-fetched, but this was an actual Viking rule of conduct. Also, Vikings could leave the city for only 3 days. Any longer, absence required permission from the elders, and they wouldn't allow you to have a conflict with anyone from the Brotherhood. Forgive and forget seemed to have been the Jomsvikings' motto. These rules sound fair, but Jomsborg didn't last long. It only existed for some 85 years. That's the length of the average lifespan in the European Union today. Basically, one human generation. In fact, the whole Viking Age lasted shortly, just over 2 centuries in total. But this was long enough to create the legend of the Norsemen. They are all over our popular culture. There was a TV show, Vikings, and the movie, The Northman. Even the animated movie How to Train Your Dragon had a little Viking as the main hero. And most of them mention a place from Norse mythology, Valhalla. Now, if Jomsborg is semi-legendary, Valhalla is 100% fiction. It is the Hall of Fallen Warriors. Remember how the Jomsvikings had to honor a code of behavior? They did so in the hope of earning their place in Valhalla. This was a splendid place. The people there feast on boar meat every day, under a roof made of shields. Every Viking's dream, right? That's not all. They get into scrimmages with each other on a daily basis. But what exactly motivated the Vikings to take up a life of seafaring? There is no simple answer, but this seems to be a rags-to-riches story. Scandinavian people traded fur with other European nations. From them, they found out about the riches that lay to the south of their homeland. And they also knew that European leaders didn't always get along well with each other. So why not take advantage of this and earn extra cash on the side? The Vikings' motivation seems pretty modern. The very first raid was carried out by Norwegian Vikings. They sailed across the North Sea to northeast England. Europeans were shocked by the boldness of these raiders from the north. The Viking Age was about to begin. The Norsemen soon realized that European nations were ready to pay a hefty sum to avoid their visits. At the beginning of the 11th century, the English paid the Vikings more than $300,000 in today's money to leave them alone. There was even a special word for this tax. The influx of all this wealth made the Vikings' appetite only grow bigger. But this was all about to change in 1066, possibly the most important date in English history. That year, the last great Viking king went to England. However, he couldn't find victory at Stamford Bridge. Yes, the place where the Chelsea Football Club plays its matches today. After the Norwegian king lost, the number of raids decreased. The Europeans were better equipped to defend themselves. The Viking Age slowly came to an end. But this didn't mean that the Vikings were gone forever. They stayed in Iceland for 400 years. The island was largely uninhabited before they came in the 9th century. And in England, the Vikings left their trace in place names. Every town that ends in "by" was first settled by these Scandinavians. There are around 2,000 place names across Great Britain and Ireland that can be linked to the Vikings. And can you guess which part of France has the most Viking-related toponyms? The name says it all: Normandy. The mouth of the River Seine is where most Danish Vikings settled in the 9th century. From there, they sent several raiding parties to Paris itself.
The floor is lava. Haha, just kidding. But honestly, it's kind of falling apart. You might not feel it yet, but a huge part of North America has already lost 37 miles worth of rock from its foundation. And no, this isn't about earthquakes or giant sinkholes. It's about the continent losing pieces of the very thing that keeps the ground from wobbling around like a bad carnival ride. A team of researchers has just dropped a geological bombshell. Part of North America's ground is thinning out like a very sad, very slow ice cream drip. How do they know? They basically gave Earth a high-tech full-body MRI and created 3D maps showing how rocks once considered indestructible are now melting away into the planet's guts, like an upside-down cheese pizza inside an oven. But to really understand this mess, you first have to meet my old friends, cratons. Cratons are like the roots of the continents. They're thick, tough, and ancient. We're talking billions of years old. These bad boys survived meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, and even the tectonic movement of plates. If the plates got into fistfights, for example, you can bet we would see mountain ranges being born. If they got a divorce, drifting apart from each other, then a whole new ocean would be born. All of these things leave scars on the surface of Earth, but the cratons seem to always remain unfazed, like the cockroaches of geology. And since a craton can basically get punched in the face and feel nothing, scientists always assumed these things were nearly indestructible. But then, a group of researchers took their fancy machines to the test and realized that, wait, the cratons are falling apart? How? Enter the Farallon Plate, a really ancient tectonic plate that started to slide under North America's major plate over 100 million years ago. This is a pretty normal process, actually. It's called subduction, and it's how Earth recycles rocks and keeps itself from overheating. This subduction thing has been happening for so long that, by now, the Farallon is almost 400 miles away from the craton, sitting pretty chill at the lower mantle, weirdly close to the outer core of our planet. But the Farallon has been causing trouble, like that one roommate who moved out but keeps leaving weird stuff in the fridge. You see, as it sinks, it tugs on the bottom of North America's foundation, stretching it out and causing pieces to fall off into the deep mantle. And if that wasn't enough drama, the sinking Farallon has also leaked water and carbon dioxide into the surrounding rocks, making the craton even softer and easier to shred apart. Thanks, Farallon. Very cool of you. By studying hundreds of earthquakes across thousands of monitoring stations, scientists have confirmed the story. Big chunks of continental material are dripping downward, thinning the craton by as much as 37 miles. That's more missing rocks than can fit into a milk carton. Sounds dramatic, right? But don't worry. This is happening at a snail's pace. It'll take millions of years for anything noticeable to happen. Your great-great-great-great few grandkids from the distant future might still be standing on solid ground. But don't get too comfy. This thing may not be an urgent problem, but there's another type of sinking that's happening faster than you can say, "Help!" Here's the thing. By 2050, at least 32 major cities in the US, including New York, Baltimore, and Charleston, could be partially underwater. And guess what? This one is mostly our fault. Scientists noticed that since 2007, some cities have been sinking into the ground between 0.04 and 0.08 inches every year. Charleston, in South Carolina, is pulling ahead in the worst way possible, sinking 0.15 inches annually. Sure, these numbers sound tiny and a bit ridiculous, but Charleston is barely 9 feet above sea level. And a little sinking goes a long way when the ocean is breathing down your neck. On really bad flood days, people there have to abandon their cars and basically swim home. This whole phenomenon is called land subsidence. And when you mix sinking land with rising sea levels, you get a disaster cocktail of flooded streets, salty farmland, ghost forests, and a lot of very cranky homeowners. And it doesn't stop with just homes. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, airports, and power plants, all things we rely on daily, are also at risk of serious damage. Flooded electrical grids and sunken highways could cause billions more in economic losses and create major safety hazards for communities. Now, let's be fair. Not everything is humanity's fault. Some of this trouble dates all the way back to the Ice Age. About 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets covered the northern US. They were heavy, like seriously heavy. The weight pushed the land down, and when the ice melted, the ground didn't just pop back up like a trampoline. Instead, it started playing a weird game of geological seesaw. The places that were squished started rising, and the places that weren't got pulled down. This whole process, called glacial isostatic adjustment, try to say that 3 times fast. But of course, humans found a way to make it worse. Groundwater extraction is a major culprit. Think of it like pulling the stuff out of the mattress. After a while, the whole thing just sags. In places like California's Central Valley, the land is dropping by up to 8 inches a year because we keep pumping out water during droughts. In cities like New York, the problem isn't just water. Skyscrapers themselves are making it worse. Yep, turns out if you stack millions of tons of concrete and steel onto soft ground, it tends to flatten. And in case you're wondering, the total mass of New York City's buildings is around 1.68 trillion pounds. That's about the same as 3.5 million statues of liberty piled up. With so much weight concentrated over a relatively small area, the underlying soils have no choice but to compress over time. And if you thought it couldn't get messier, think again. We've been building dams, which stop rivers from delivering fresh sediment to coastal areas. That sediment is kind of like Mother Nature's way of fluffing the ground back up. Without it, coastal lands are compacting like an old sponge. Plus, when wetlands are drained for agriculture or construction, the peaty soil dries out and collapses. Honestly, it's like the ground just can't catch a break. Scientists also noticed that the areas that used to be lush wetlands are now among the fastest sinking spots in the country, especially along the Gulf Coast. Louisiana, for example, is losing about a football field of land because of this mix of subsidence and rising seas. So what's the endgame here for us regular people who just want to live above sea level? Well, it's not looking great. Ghost forests, which are basically drowned woodlands, are popping up. Farmland is turning salty and unusable. And even sunny day flooding, where streets flood without any rain, is becoming a thing. Yikes! Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California is not exactly winning either. San Francisco and Los Angeles are both sinking, which means that rising sea levels could hit them twice as hard and twice as fast. In some places like the Palos Verdes Peninsula, the ground has been sinking so fast, people over there might as well live like moles. So, is America turning into the next Atlantis? Probably not next week, but without serious action, like cutting back on groundwater pumping and planning smarter cities, at least 500,000 people are in serious danger. And the housing damage could easily rack up a jaw-dropping $109 billion by 2050. In the end, while North America isn't about to sink like a poorly made souffle, it's definitely showing some cracks in the crust. So maybe let's ease up on groundwater pumping, rethink how and where we build, and invest a little more in keeping our feet dry. After all, if the floor really does become lava someday, we're gonna wish we had at least fixed the leaks first.
In the U.S., the country experiences floods in places around 300 days each year. However, there was one exceptional flood that captured the attention of not only Americans, but the entire world. Boston was drowning in a crazy amount of sweet syrup. It's like a huge mess you'd see at a candy store. Sounds kind of like a kid's dream, right? But for the people living there, it was a total nightmare. Instead of water, the whole city of Boston was engulfed in molasses. Now, if you're not up to speed on this sticky situation, let me give you the lowdown. Molasses is a thick, gooey substance that comes from sugarcane or sugar beet juice during the sugar-making process. Back in the old days, molasses was the go-to sweetener in the Americas up until the 20th century. But molasses isn't just for cooking. It can even be used to boost soil health by aiding in microbial activity. So as you can see, this stuff is versatile and has its hands in various industries. So on January 15, 1919, things in Boston were heating up, literally. Temperatures had finally climbed above 40 degrees Fahrenheit after a freezing cold spell. The previous days were frigid, so people could finally have a little break from the winter and enjoy slightly warmer weather for a day. In the morning, people were minding their own business. At Engine 31 Firehouse, a bunch of guys were chowing down on lunch and having a good time playing board games. Some kids were off collecting firewood for their family. Meanwhile, bartender Martin was still peacefully sleeping at his house after working late at his bar. Suddenly, as the clock struck midday, Boston people started noticing that something was off. They felt the earth tremble and heard a loud noise as it fell, like a train passing by. But there was no train around. Others described it as a big crash, a low growl, a bang as loud as thunder. Little did they realize that those noises were a clear indication that mayhem was about to go down. Nobody could foresee it at that point. But on Commercial Street in Boston's North End, at around 12:30 p.m., a massive 50-foot steel tank on a ship that had arrived in Boston a day earlier and that held 2.3 million gallons of molasses suddenly burst open. Some say it might have been caused by the older, cooler molasses expanding in the tank's heat. The molasses surged at 35 miles per hour, engulfing everything in its path. Buildings collapsed effortlessly. Individuals and animals fought to navigate through the sticky chaos, and an impromptu rescue effort was launched. The firehouse on Engine 31 got completely knocked off its foundation, with the second floor collapsing on top of the first. At the same time, the bartender Martin's house nearby was swept away and smashed into the elevated train platform. Martin, the bartender who had just woken up, witnessed his house falling apart around him before being carried away by the current. He was in bed on the third floor when he heard a loud noise. When he woke up, he was surrounded by several feet of molasses. He almost drowned in the sticky mess before managing to climb onto his bed frame, which miraculously was floating nearby. He used the bed frame as a makeshift boat. Unlike Rose and Jack, who couldn't make it together, Martin was able to rescue his sister Teresa, but unfortunately, his mother and younger brother did not survive the disaster. The aftermath of the incident included a large-scale cleanup effort, multiple lawsuits against the company that was to blame, and a lengthy legal dispute spanning 5 years until the company was held accountable for the tragedy. The company ended up giving the flood victims and their families a total of $628,000 in compensation, which would be like $8 million today. Not much, given that, eventually, the number of people who lost their lives from the flood reached 20, with 150 others getting hurt. Plus, it took a few days to find some of the bodies. One guy, who was a wagon driver, wasn't found in Boston Harbor until about 4 months later. Still, it was exceedingly rare back then that a company did compensate. Most of them dodged responsibility for negligence at those times. Victims who were in greater distress before they suffocated, if I may say so, received higher compensation. How do you even put a price on something like drowning in molasses? Well, Judge Hugh Ogden had the job of determining that in the aftermath of the disaster. He oversaw distributing funds to those affected. So he awarded around $6,000, which is about $600,000 today, to the families of those who passed away instantly. However, families of those who had to endure the molasses waves before they passed received $7,500. For example, there was a man stuck in a small crawl space in the basement of a firehouse, struggling to keep his head above the molasses for approximately 4 hours before he eventually suffocated, so his family was awarded more. Despite the destruction, the North End neighborhood bounced back as workers cleared debris and firefighters cleaned up the remaining molasses. The lingering scent of sweetness stayed for weeks. Imagine going about your day with a sweet aroma in the air, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. However, some people claim it lingered for decades, not weeks, and you could smell molasses in some Boston basements even into the 60s. It sort of makes sense because most basements were indeed filled up to the first floor. Molasses even changed the colors of Boston. The brownish hue Boston harbor waters got because of the molasses persisted until summer, leaving a lasting impression on the city's past. The molasses company tried to pin the chaos on radicals, but we now know the real culprit behind the disaster: a poorly constructed tank that couldn't contain over 2 million gallons of goo that flooded the streets of the North End. Despite the company's claim that a group of radical people sabotaged the tank, there was no evidence to support this wild theory. The molasses wave just swept through the streets, dragging everything in its path – carts, animals, houses. It was a tragic sight that caused a lot of destruction and injuries. Even horses in the nearby stables weren't safe from the molasses. Many of them sadly didn't make it out alive, and the police had to put down the ones trapped in the sticky mess. Things got even crazier when a police officer called for help because the molasses wave had caused a train to derail. Thankfully, quick thinking stopped things from getting even worse. Even though there were warnings about the tank having issues, the disaster still caught many people off guard. Some kids even tasted the leaking molasses without knowing the danger they were in. Cleaning up after the molasses disaster turned out to be a real challenge, lasting for months until things were back to normal. At first, civil servants, police, and volunteers all pitched in together. They used salt water from fireboats to get rid of the molasses and then used sand to soak it up. It took a while to really clean up the area around the harbor, and the water looked sadly strange for a while. After that, crews had to track down where else the molasses had gone in the city. It had spread all over the subway, making a mess on platforms and in train cars. It had gotten into people's homes and other spots around town. A journalist even said that everything a Bostonian touched ended up sticky. The disaster totally shook up safety rules around the country. Basically, all the building standards we have now, like architects showing their work, engineers sealing their plans, and inspectors checking things out, can be traced back to the Great Boston Molasses Flood. It started in Massachusetts and then spread throughout the country. The flood really made a huge impact on building construction standards, similar to what the Coconut Grove fire did for fire safety rules. Ring ring, your mail's here. You ordered it yesterday all the way from across the country, but it only took a day and a half for it to reach you. It's certainly not like the 1800s when your mail would get delivered by horse. The entire process back then would take up to 10 days, and it's not like it came from another continent. Frontiersmen were your postal service. They'd hop on their horses and ride the distance. Considering how far away it was, and it could be thousands and thousands of miles, they did this in a surprisingly short amount of time. Gears have shifted though. We've come to the 1900s, and you're a pilot now. You're en route and it's getting dark, but you're still thousands of feet up in the air. Maybe it's time for you to land since you can't see a thing. Plus, you're starting to run low on fuel. If you were to have an emergency landing right now, things might get iffy down there. You'd be in a strange territory, and you won't know what weird things you might be up against. Some of your coworkers tried, and it wasn't a very good idea. Look out for that shadow. Even if you did want to fly at night without much visibility whatsoever, it wouldn't be a good idea. See, you're guided by landmarks when charting your route. That mountain ahead looks familiar, but the closer you get to it, the more you realize you've made a mistake. It's not like the weather will play nice either. So you stop, and the letters you were carrying will now go on a train where they can ride out for the rest of the night. After dawn, it's time for another pilot to take them up to the sky again to speed up the process. This whole ordeal takes a lot longer than it should just for mail to get across the country, and people are already waiting at their doorstep with their arms crossed and grumpy faces. Radars are nowhere to be seen yet, so great minds got to thinking, what if we change things with some big arrows on the ground? This way, pilots would always know where to go. On top of these, towers would serve as beacons of light. Now pilots would be able to navigate at night, and you wouldn't need to rely on sketchy mountains to know where you're at. The arrows went all the way from New York to San Francisco, and there were approximately 1,500 of them. Towers were 50 feet tall, and their lights would rotate while flashing every 10 seconds. The arrows themselves were pretty huge too, about 50 to 70 feet long. They were painted bright yellow so you wouldn't miss them. Every 3 to 5 miles, you'd spot one of these arrow beacons. When the weather was nice, you'd be able to see the lights coming from the beacons from as far as 10 miles away. And below those, there was another set of lights. Red and green lights would flash a Morse code, and pilots would know exactly what beacon this was. The worst has happened, and one of your engines is failing. You're prepared for this, and up ahead, there's a landing field placed there exactly for this type of situation. Every 25 miles along the aero route, you'd find one of these intermediate landing fields with rotating radiant lights on them. Even though less common, these would be more powerful than the other type. You could see them from as far as 75 miles away. But technology kept improving, and it got to the point that the regular beacon lights got so strong, they'd be seen up to 40 miles away in clear weather. Because of this, they only needed one tower every 10 miles. Then, the four-course radio stations came along, and all a pilot needed was a radio receiver, a pair of headphones, and a chart. Arrows became a thing of the past. On the plane, a pilot would listen to audio signals to check if they were on track. And soon, the radio was all there was. You'd have it all: guidance, weather info, and even radio beacon signals. With Morse code communication, pilots would turn to the right when hearing a certain stream of code, and to the left if they heard a different one. A steady tone would mean they could just fly straight ahead. Sometimes, though, mountains would bounce off radio signals, and it would lead pilots into a completely different course. This, of course, would end up with a plane being stranded somewhere. LORAN, that's long-range navigation, coordinated the pilot's location better. These stations were placed all across the Atlantic and the Pacific. Two different stations placed far away from each other would emit a signal at the exact same time. And with the help of two others, also emitting signals, you'd be able to figure out the location of a plane. It's a four-station work. LORAN had a big weakness: electrical storms. Put simply, if a plane was in the middle of a storm, it would be like it never existed. The last aero beacon was only shut down in 1973. It lasted a long time. But today, you'll still be able to see some of the arrows from back then. They aren't painted bright yellow anymore, they're just big, plain, concrete arrows. Most of them were lost while redeveloping some of the cities over the United States. There's one west of Phoenix, Arizona. It was the beacon number 33 of the LA to Phoenix Airway. The arrow is gone, but part of the radio tower is still there, although in bad condition. There are about 10 of them in California, and the rest are spread around the country. But let's jump a few years back before the arrows and radio. Around 1910, when pilots would only fly using pilotage, they'd chart their route based on landmarks. They would only dare flying during the day and not at a high altitude. In the 1920s, though, they started venturing into flying at night and even further than they were used to. But since landmarks were nearly impossible to identify at night, they started using celestial navigation. They tried to read the stars to know where they were. They had the help of some tools, but it wasn't too effective because they would still get lost more often than not. Turbulence wouldn't help either, because instead of reading one star, they'd look at a completely different one, the wrong one. With no light pollution and way too many stars to count, it was too easy to get lost in the sky. A plane stays aloft because its wings are shaped so that air moves faster over the top of the wing, and because the air is moving faster, its pressure decreases. It means there's less pressure on top of the wing than on its bottom. It's this difference that lifts the wings and the plane up. Rolling the plane is the aileron's job. You lower the aileron on the wing you want to rise, and you raise the aileron on the wing you want to drop. The pitch is what makes a plane go up and down when the elevators on the plane's tail are adjusted by the pilot. Lowering them will make the plane's nose drop, and raising them will make it rise. The yaw is what makes the plane turn. It's the rudder's job. When it is turned to one side, it'll move either left or right. The nose of the plane will always be pointed in the same direction as the rudder. Next time you're on a commercial flight, you can track the plane's movement yourself and know what the pilot's doing. Not entirely, though, because there are tons of complicated mechanics and systems at work in that cabin in front of you. And if you want to know how that works, it might be time for you to enroll in a flight academy. Maybe one day you'll fly fast enough to break the sound barrier. Pilots that do this literally break the sound waves that form in front and around the plane. Air will gather and compress in front of the plane. This will form a shock wave that the plane needs to go through, and when it does, it makes a really loud noise, a sonic boom. It's because of the sudden change in the air pressure. The Concorde was a commercial plane that was way too expensive for an average person. It not only broke through the sound barrier, but could travel up to 5 times the speed of sound. If you've ever been to Yellowstone National Park, you were probably mesmerized by its geysers, which spew superheated water and steam high into the air. But an even more intriguing thing actually hides underground. I'm talking about that underfoot plumbing system that makes those grand eruptions possible. About that, there's good news. Recently, researchers have succeeded in mapping the national park's hydrothermal plumbing system with the help of a giant flying magnet. As a result, scientists have managed to document all these features in stunning detail. The thing is, Yellowstone houses the world's largest hydrothermal system. It contains over 10,000 features, like geysers, mud pots, hot springs, and steam vents. They're fed by a network of underground water pathways. Those get overheated by magma flowing underground. It causes the water to rise to the surface. Now, no one actually knows much about the workings of this system, but the newly created maps might finally shed light on it. Experts explain that their knowledge of Yellowstone has a subsurface gap. That's why it's often called a mystery sandwich. Scientists know quite a lot about the features on the surface because they can observe them directly. And they know what's going on in the magmatic and tectonic system several miles below the surface. But they haven't figured out what's happening in the middle yet. So, I must tell you about that giant flying magnet used for research. It's known as SkyTem. It was attached to a helicopter and flown over Yellowstone several hundred times, scanning the ground below. The magnet is made up of an 82-foot wide charged wire loop. Its main task is to generate a strong electromagnetic field. And since different kinds of material, like water or rock, respond to this field differently, scientists managed to create a few subsurface maps for the first time ever. The mapping technique also allowed the researchers to differentiate between magma and bedrock, since they have a bit different magnetic properties. And the team got a chance to see how the magma and water interact and create those mind-blowing geological features on the surface. The team got high-resolution maps to a depth of around 500 and 2,300 feet, and low-resolution maps showing what's going on at a depth of up to 1.5 miles. At the same time, the researchers think that the hydrothermal system itself may stretch as far as 3 miles below the surface. If they're right, it means they've only mapped the top half of Yellowstone's plumbing system. Anyway, remember how I said that scientists know pretty much about the bottom part of the Yellowstone sandwich? They have such a good idea about the tectonic plates and deep fault lines because the park's frequent earthquakes provide them with a lot of opportunities to study different phenomena. In July 2021, for example, more than 1,000 earthquakes rocked the area. These days, the team of researchers knows much more about some famous features, like the Old Faithful Geyser or the Grand Prismatic Spring. They've also found out that individual hydrothermal features on the surface can actually be connected to others, which can be as far as 6 miles away from them. Another interesting discovery is that even though Yellowstone geysers and hot springs vary in size, shape, color, volatility, and chemical composition, they are mostly fed by very similar underground sources. That means that the difference between the features appears closer to the surface. Now, I'm sure you've seen the iconic image of Yellowstone with a large rainbow-colored spring, fiery orange at its edges. So what makes these hot springs so colorful? Surprisingly, these awesome hues come from microscopic creatures. The temperatures in the springs are so high, they can easily and quickly cook you. Plus, the water there is super acidic, like the liquid in a car battery. But there are certain types of heat-loving microbes that don't mind these crazy conditions. You can even say they're thriving there. So every ring of a different color is, in most cases, a ring inhabited by different bacteria. And each species is adapted to a particular temperature or pH level, which measures how acidic this or that environment is. For example, take the Grand Prismatic Spring, yes, the iconic one. Its rainbow hues likely hint at the diversity of microbes living there. So, starting from the center of the hot spring, you can see a beautiful aquamarine color there. That's where the water temperature is the highest, reaching 189 degrees Fahrenheit. because this area is right over the underground water source. The water there is too hot even for microbes. That's why what you see is mostly clear water. As for the reason for its blue color, it's the same as why the sky is blue. Sunlight hits the surface of the water and the light scatters, but the blue light scatters the most, getting reflected back to your eyes. Now, the next ring of color is yellow, all thanks to certain cyanobacteria. The temperature in this yellow ring reaches 165 degrees Fahrenheit. If the conditions in the hot spring were a bit different, these bacteria would create a blue-green hue thanks to a green pigment called chlorophyll. But since the sunlight hitting the spring is too intense, the bacteria start producing another type of pigment. It's called carotenoids. And guess what? It acts as a sunscreen for the bacteria. And since this pigment is orange, the normally green bacteria get a yellowish hue. And finally, we've got that bright orange color closer to the edges of the prismatic spring. It's a bit cooler there, around 149 degrees Fahrenheit. In this part of the spring, you can find several types of bacteria. They all produce substances that give the spring this bright orange color. And finally, right at the edges of the spring, the temperature is cooler, around 131 degrees, and a greater variety of microbes can survive there. All of them combined give the edges of the spring that red-brown hue. But scientists believe that people and their activity may have influenced the colors of Yellowstone's hydrothermal features. For example, in the past, the temperatures in the Morning Glory pool used to be much higher than they are today. That's why its color was a deep blue. But trash has started to accumulate in the pool, and some of it clogged the vent. This caused the temperatures to drop, which led to microbial growth. As a result, that pretty blue color turned into orange-yellow. As for Yellowstone's geysers, the most famous one is called Old Faithful. It got this name at the end of the 19th century because of how regular its eruptions were. This geyser is more active than the others, erupting about 20 times a day. Each of these magnificent events lasts from 1 to 5 minutes, and the fountain of steaming water can reach a height of 180 feet. Now, while talking about Yellowstone National Park, we can't but mention Yellowstone supervolcano, right? Supervolcanoes appear when huge volumes of magma are trying to escape from deep underground. Eventually, they burst through Earth's surface. Sometimes all this magma gets stuck, unable to break through the planet's crust. And then, massive pools of pressurized magma gather at a depth of several miles. The pressure keeps growing because more and more magma is trying to get to the surface. At one point, a super eruption goes off. You don't necessarily want to be around for that. Over the past 50 years, the Yellowstone caldera has risen almost 3 feet. It shouldn't alarm you, though. Experts are sure it's a natural behavior for Yellowstone. Periods of dome-shaped uplift are followed by the caldera lowering. Scientists think the supervolcano doesn't present any danger at the moment. For an eruption to happen, the magma inside has to be at least 50% molten. With Yellowstone, this number is just 5 to 15%. Even better, a recent study made the researchers believe the hotspot might be in a state of decline right now, even despite all the breathing and dome-raising activity. There have been at least 3 other super eruptions in the history of Yellowstone volcano. They happened 2.1 million, 1.3 million, and 640,000 years ago, long before video. The most recent super eruption was dubbed the Lava Creek eruption. It formed the Yellowstone caldera after spilling out 240 cubic miles of rock, dust, and volcanic ash. No thanks, I'll pass. People in the U.S. consume around 100 acres of pizza every day, which is almost the size of Vatican City. Also, they drink 146 billion cups of coffee a year. Now, with that amount of coffee, you could fill an average-sized lake in approximately 10 years. But you couldn't fill Lake Superior because it has enough water to cover the whole U.S. with 1 foot of liquid. Now, people in the U.S. generally don't live in rural states like Wyoming, and because of that, more people live in New York than in 39 out of 50 states of the U.S. At the same time, Wyoming is the 10th largest state in the U.S. It's bigger than the UK, but it's also the least populated state. You could drive through it for hours without seeing a single person. And because there's no strangers around, locals don't even lock their doors. Also, the whole state only has 2 escalators. Count them. Nestled within Wyoming's borders is iconic Yellowstone, the country's first national park. Now, living in Wyoming can be likened to playing a game on hard mode. It's one of the windiest and coldest states. The weather is genuinely wild, and it's not for everyone. There are also positive things about Wyoming, like its affordable stay and endless outdoor activities. It has a population of 576,000 people. That number of inhabitants could fill a small city. But everything you love about the outdoors can be found here, and that's why people choose this state. Vermont is the muddiest state in the U.S. It even has its own Loch Ness Monster. In the 17th century, European cartographer Samuel de Champlain reported seeing a 20-foot monster in Lake Champlain, named after him, that was as thick as a barrel and had a head like a horse. And since then, many more people have allegedly seen this creature. Vermont is an excellent state with tons of natural beauty. It's the perfect place for starting a farm. The state has a population of a little over 500,000 people. There are more folks in a few blocks in New York than the entire state of Vermont. It's a rural place, not ideal for building huge cities. But if you love farms and maple syrup, then Vermont is a haven for you. It produced over 2 million gallons of maple syrup in 2003. Vermont is also very cold, so people have invented snow golf. They would paint golf balls red and play in the winter on hard, icy snow. Now let's talk about the largest state in America, Alaska, the last frontier. This state is so big that it could fit 19 other states. But when it comes to population, Alaska could be doing a bit better. It has stunning natural beauty, like huge forests and lakes. At the same time, there's a lot of wildlife, which can sometimes be frustrating. Imagine sitting in your garden and getting visited by a grizzly bear or a wolf. Part of the problem is that the cities are too far apart. It's at least a 6-hour drive from one city to another. Still, if you love the outdoors, Alaska is the place for you. Plus, you get paid to live there. But there is a problem. As we all know, Alaska is not connected to the rest of the U.S., so most goods have to travel a long way, meaning everything is quite expensive there. And one of the biggest reasons people don't like living there is that it's freezing. You must shovel tons of snow just to get outside and do simple tasks. Around 700,000 people live in Alaska year-round. And if you ask them, they'll probably tell you that they like it there because there aren't many people around. When you think of South Dakota, the first thing that comes to mind is Mount Rushmore, and that is basically it. The state has a population of a little under 1 million and is practically empty. It has harsh weather and it's pretty far from everything. But the people of South Dakota are super friendly. If you go there, you'll feel welcome. Also, as with many other states, the beauty of nature might surprise you. North Dakota is similar to South Dakota, but a little more challenging than South Dakota. The state has tough winters, hot and humid summers, and no big cities. And if that wasn't enough, it also has a lot of floods. When people hear about this, they usually stay away, despite Dakota being a beautiful state. It has a population of 780,000 people, making it the 4th least populated state in the U.S. When settlers were moving there, only a tiny number of people remained in the end. Many moved to Canada, where farmland is better thanks to better weather and more fertile soil. North Dakota has some unique benefits, like low cost of living and low unemployment rates. And if you are a nature lover, you won't be disappointed. It has 13 state parks and 3 national parks, all with fantastic scenery. Delaware is a small state with an even smaller population. The biggest city in Delaware is Wilmington, which has a population of 70,500 people. As for the whole state, it has around 1,031,890 people. It also has 2 million corporations, but no big cities. You may wonder about the reason. Well, they don't pay income taxes there, and those corporations are not actually located in Delaware, meaning that the local people there really don't benefit from them. The state is prone to storms. Philadelphia, which is close to Delaware, has fewer storms and is closer to major cities, so corporations simply move there. Most people who live in Delaware are retired. They don't need jobs, but love the fantastic beaches this state offers. Hey there, cowboy! We're going on a horse ride to the most beautiful state with teeming wildlife, which houses one of the best national parks, Glacier. Of course, I'm talking about Montana. This state has a little over 1 million people and is bigger than Japan in territory. But Japan has around 111 times more people than Montana. Why? Well, most people don't want to be cowboys. Generally speaking, people tend to like living in big cities, which Montana doesn't have. Plus, Montana has tough winters and expensive houses. And people don't like being cold. That's why Florida has so many people. Rhode Island has a population of a bit over 1 million, making it the 8th smallest state in the USA. Rhode Island is a small, flat coastal state. If you climb on a chair, you might see the whole state. Just kidding, you can't do that. By territory, it's the smallest state in the US, but it's densely packed with people. At the same time, the inhabitants of this state are gradually leaving it. The cost of living there is high, so they would rather go somewhere more affordable. Now let's say you're from Canada. In this case, if you accidentally teleported to Maine, you wouldn't even notice it because the landscape would look almost the same. Maine has beautiful lakes, mountains, dense pine trees, and many moose. If you see one, stay away. Maine is truly a beautiful state, but it has a small population of around 1,300,000 people. Maine has terrible winters, so almost everyone lives near the coast or as far south as possible to escape crazy snowstorms that are common here. Because of this, 89% of Maine is covered with forests. This is one of the reasons why there aren't many industries here. Portland is the biggest and most beautiful city in this state, but only around 38% of the population lives in cities. Most inhabitants of the state are avid outdoor lovers.
Some mistakes have the power to change the course of history. One such story has to do with an old, boring key that could have saved the Titanic from its infamous demise. The key belonged to the crow's nest locker that housed binoculars, which could have helped the lookouts spot the iceberg sooner. There's more. The key wasn't even on board the ship when it set sail. The second officer took it with him when he was taken off the ship at the last minute. As the story goes, the officer forgot to hand the key over to his replacement in his hurry to disembark. So, when the lookouts were in desperate need of binoculars, they were out of luck. One of the lookouts, named Fred Fleet, even testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it. And when asked how much sooner, Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." In 2015, some auctioneers got their hands on Blair's key and presented it as one of the most important artifacts from the Titanic. They truly believed it could have saved the ship. Blair kept the key as a souvenir and passed it down to his daughter, Nancy. At one point, it was up for auction with a price tag of over $80,000. Blair himself was quite the hero, it seems. A year after the Titanic disaster, he was awarded a gallantry medal for saving a crewman who had fallen overboard while he had been on board the liner Majestic. He may have forgotten a key, but he sure didn't forget to be a hero when it counted. This next story is both funny and tragic. It's about NASA's lost $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter. The spacecraft engineers failed to convert from English to metric measurements before the craft was launched, and as a result, they lost it. The navigation team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of millimeters and meters, while Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver used the English system of inches, feet, and pounds. JPL engineers mistook acceleration readings measured in English units of pound-seconds for a metric measure of force called Newton seconds. What's worse, is that none of JPL's quality control procedures caught the error in the 9 months it took the spacecraft to make its 461 million mile flight to Mars. That's a long time to be lost in translation, don't you think? The miscalculations were enough to throw the spacecraft so far off track that it flew too deeply into the Martian atmosphere and was destroyed when it entered its initial orbit around Mars. It's embarrassing to lose a spacecraft to such a simple math error. And it's hard to think of another example of such a large loss due to English versus metric confusion. Ever heard about the mathematical mistake that led to the discovery of the New World? Spoiler alert, it involves a guy named Christopher Columbus and a really big globe. Back in 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with a mission to find a new trade route to Asia. He was convinced that he was less than 3,000 miles away from Japan, and just a bit more sailing would get him to the Indies with all their tasty spices. The only problem was that Columbus was a bit off in his calculations, like way off. He made a mistake in estimating the size of the globe, which led him to believe that Earth was far smaller than it actually is. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Columbus afraid that he would fall off the edge of the world? Contrary to popular myth, Columbus and his crew knew the Earth was a globe, just like the ancient Greeks did 2 millennia earlier. They weren't worried about falling off the edge, but rather about the size of the ocean they planned on crossing. And to make matters worse, Columbus had no idea that an unknown landmass existed between Spain and Asia. After weeks at sea, Columbus finally reached the Caribbean. He believed that he had landed on the outskirts of Asia, and so named the islands the West Indies. He went on to explore the Caribbean and the northern coast of South America. But here's where things get really interesting. Even though Columbus insisted until his last day that he had reached Asia, another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern shore of South America down to Brazil and proved conclusively that Columbus had actually discovered a whole new world. A German mapmaker saw Amerigo's maps and labeled the new landmass America after him. And since his maps were super popular at the time, the name stuck. One man named Alexander Fleming stumbled upon one of the most significant medical discoveries of all time by accident. At one point in his career, Fleming observed the demise of many people from uncontrollable infections. Antiseptics were used to fight this, but they often did more harm than good. In 1922, while he had a cold himself, Fleming transferred some of his, nasal discharge to a petri dish and left it on his cluttered desk. When he finally examined it weeks later, he found that an enzyme had some antimicrobial properties. It wasn't until 1928, when Fleming left an uncovered petri dish next to an open window, that he stumbled upon the discovery that would change the world. The dish became contaminated with fungus spores. And when he examined them under the microscope, Fleming discovered that the bacteria near the fungus were dying. He managed to isolate the fungus and found that it was effective against numerous things that cause diseases. And thus, penicillin was discovered. As Fleming himself put it, "I did not discover penicillin. Nature did that. I only discovered it by accident." Talk about a lucky break. In the early 1520s, the east coast of the United States of America was a big mystery waiting to be solved. The Spanish found Florida, and the English and Portuguese found Newfoundland, but the area in between was like a blank spot on the map. France decided to take action and sent an expedition to explore the area. They chose a guy called Giovanni da Verrazzano to lead the trip. For this expedition, he got 4 ships. Unfortunately, 2 of them were shipwrecked, and a third one went home after doing some other business on the Spanish coast. Only the flagship, La Dauphine, crossed the Atlantic with Verrazzano and his 50-man crew. Verrazzano set sail from Madeira. and landed at Cape Fear. From there, he sailed south, but got a little scared of running into the Spanish, so he returned somewhere north of Charleston. He anchored not far from his original landing spot, but unlike other explorers, he preferred to anchor well out at sea. He did send a boat to the shore, and he met the natives. They were described as wearing just some animal skins covering their bodies and garlands of bird feathers. As Verrazano sailed along the coast, he reached the outer banks of North Carolina. He thought that the waters he discovered were those of the Pacific. In reality, what he'd stumbled upon was the Pamlico Sound. He thought that North America was just a long, extremely narrow strip of land. This mistake led mapmakers to show North America as almost completely divided in two. Moving on, Verrazano reached a beautiful place that he called Arcadia. Probably Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Sailing further north, he missed the entrances to Chesapeake and Delaware Bays because he kept quite far from the coast until New Jersey. Then, the moment we've all been waiting for, Verrazano discovered New York Harbor, and he anchored in the Narrows. Later, it was named after him, and now it is spanned by the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Once Verrazano's sea appeared on the map, it became widely accepted and impacted loads of future explorers. For example, Henry Hudson went looking for a passage to the Pacific in the middle latitudes of the continent. But, as it turns out, the Englishman never did find the Pacific Ocean anywhere near Virginia. And the cartographic myth eventually faded away. It's funny to think about how a mistaken belief could have such an impact on history.
According to the United Nations, India became the most populous country in the world in 2023. Can you guess where the United States of America stands in that rating? It's number 3. And America is the 4th largest country in terms of size. It takes up some 6% of Earth's landmass. Plenty of space for 335 million people who live there, right? No need to squeeze them into one region. Well, not quite. The population of the U.S. is distributed pretty unevenly. Let's draw a line right through the middle of the country. It'll run from North Dakota in the north to Texas in the south. Once you input census data and do some math, astounding figures appear. 80% of the U.S. population lives east of the imaginary line. The remaining 20% live to the west. That's just 1 in 5 Americans. We're talking about large metropolitan areas such as Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. You don't believe me? Just look at a satellite map of the U.S. at night. The right part is shining pretty bright, right? But why? Why is there such a huge imbalance in population? Simply put, history and geography. The East Coast is the place where the U.S. became independent in 1776. These are the original 13 colonies. Soon enough, settlers started spreading westward. One important milestone was the Louisiana Purchase. Today, this region is mostly what we call the Midwest. The area aligns nicely with the Mississippi watershed. Yup, this means plenty of fertile soil ideal for agriculture. But does this automatically mean a spike in population? The demographics of the U.S. reveal that a majority of its citizens live either on the east or the west coast. This leaves a large patch of land in the middle of the country virtually empty. People know it as America's underpopulated belt. The area stretches from the Canadian border in the north to Mexico in the south. The total surface area of this strip of land is 350,000 square miles. That's twice the size of California. One massive piece of land. In fact, this narrow strip accounts for 12% of the contiguous United States. That's the U.S. without Alaska and Hawaii. The belt runs north to south through 7 states, but its population makes up only 1% of the total number of people living in the United States. Now, this doesn't mean that the area is completely empty. It's still home to just over 3 million people. That's roughly the population of the island country of Jamaica. but there is room here for many more residents. Let's take the example of Nigeria. Its total land area is slightly bigger than the sparsely inhabited belt in America. But Nigeria's population is a huge 206 million people. This makes it the 7th most populated country on the planet. Impressive, right? But why isn't the American Midwest living up to its potential? Well, time for one last history lesson. I've already mentioned how the United States expanded from the East Coast to the West Coast. This doesn't mean that the West was lagging too far behind. Take, for example, the cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles. They were incorporated in 1850. That's just 13 years after Chicago. The following year, Portland, Oregon became incorporated. You get the picture. And then, in 1869, the United States completed building its first transcontinental railroad. In terms of transport, the country was unified. There is no historical reason strong enough to explain why so few people live in the center of the country. So now it's time for some interesting geography. If you look at the physical map of the United States, you'll notice that this belt lies in the Great Plains. As the name suggests, the area is flat, which should be ideal for large settlements. Well, not really. East of this region, there is a huge patch of the color brown. It's covered by mountains. But not just any mountains. These are the Rockies. The range is around 76 million years old. It has several peaks over 14,000 feet. And most of the Rockies are national parks, a vast nature reserve. But most importantly, the range plays a vital role in the region's climate. Ever heard of the rain shadow effect? Let me explain. Wet weather systems form over the Pacific Ocean. Then they travel east, where they meet the Rockies. Now the air has to go up over the mountains. This is where it cools down and condenses. The final result? A lot of rain and snow for the people living on or west of the range. And just a few drops east of it. When air from the Pacific finally reaches the Great Plains, it doesn't contain much moisture anymore. In fact, the weather system starts taking up moisture from the surrounding landscape. This creates an arid climate east of the Rocky Mountains. That's the exact location of the belt where so few Americans live. It's one of the driest parts of the country. So when settlers came in the 19th century, they were like, nah, I'll just continue west. Plus, there was the gold rush in California they were heading for. The climate in this part of the plains isn't great for agriculture, and huge fluctuations in air temperature don't help either. In a single day, temperatures can drop from 70 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. These sudden changes in outside temperature are harmful to human health. It's like stepping inside an air-conditioned room on a sizzling summer day. Not a pleasant feeling. Southern California has a similarly dry climate, yet close to 40 million people live there. This makes California the most populous U.S. state. Their secret? A vast network of irrigation canals and aqueducts, plus a share of water from the Colorado River. Summers in the Great Plains get very hot, while winters are extremely cold. The reason behind these wild weather patterns are polar winds. They get a piggyback ride along the ridges of the Rockies and then rapidly descend into the plains. A winter day in Wyoming, for example, can start pleasantly warm, but later in the afternoon, the temperature can easily drop below zero. You just wouldn't know how to dress, and you probably wouldn't want to relocate here. That's what 99% of Americans think too. Humans like to feel comfortable, so we choose to live in temperate climate zones. Places that are either too cold or too hot don't have a large population. Just look at the driest inhabited continent. You've guessed it correctly, it's Australia. Nearly 70% of the country is either arid or semi-arid. That's a subtle way of saying that it's a desert. That's why Australians are huddled in coastal areas. 90% of them live in big cities, such as Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. The only exception is the capital, Canberra. They build it inland close to a water source. But Australia's interior is sparsely populated. Just like in the States, there is only one major town in an area the size of 12 Lake Michigans. A huge shout-out to the residents of Alice Springs. They truly live in an oasis. And what about places with a temperate climate like Europe? The population is evenly distributed here, right? Well, yes and no, depending on the country. In Germany, 77% of people live in urban areas. They have plenty of major cities to choose from. Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, and Köln all have over 1 million residents. But let's look at neighboring France. How many cities with a population over 1 million can you name? Okay, Paris, definitely. It has over 12 million residents in the metropolitan area. But now comes the staggering fact. The next two cities on the list have a population of barely 2 million, respectively. Can you notice the huge imbalance? This is the case in most large European countries. In Greece, for example, 35% of the population lives in the capital, Athens. So, the largely underpopulated center of the United States is not a unique example. America is the land of opportunities, but chances of finding a better life are greater in large cities. The country's top 100 metropolitan areas account for at least 3/4 of the nation's GDP, and most of them are located on the east and the west coast. There are no cities with over 1 million residents in America's underpopulated belt. So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and, honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer de lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange, circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. But the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. Sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lake bed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though. Glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake. Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish, small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lake bed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these, where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot, and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. Many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lake beds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people notice there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the Earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide? Humans are at the top of the food chain, but despite this, some creatures cause us a lot of trouble, and we can't do anything about them. Look at these flies with red eyes and blue-green bodies. These are some farmers' worst nightmare in the United States of America. Meet the New World screwworm flies. These little troublemakers have been munching on livestock from Florida to California for centuries, racking up some serious damage to the agricultural scene. To combat these pesky flies, the U.S. Department of Agriculture dropped a whopping 15 million sterile screwworm larvae from helicopters along the Panama-Colombia border. There's even a factory in Panama cranking out these sterile larvae like it's factory-fresh fruit. This action sounds weird, but it makes a lot of sense. The thing is, female flies only get one shot at mating in their entire lives. So if they happen to mate with a sterile dude, that's it. No offspring, ever. This clever trick means healthy screwworms can't reproduce when surrounded by sterile pals, which keeps their numbers in check. But how do we make these male flies sterile in the first place? Simple. A little radiation zap does the trick. You throw a bunch of flies in a lab, give them a quick spin through an X-ray machine, and then drop them from a helicopter into the wild, where their relatives are hanging out. If screwworms start making a comeback, inspectors hop on ATVs and cruise thousands of miles to hunt down any infected animals and stop the spread. There's no magic trick to wipe out these parasites completely, but the game plan is clear. Keep the sterile fly drops coming and stay one step ahead of these pesky little critters. Do you know why it's too dangerous to move animals from one habitat to another? There's a possibility that they won't encounter predators in the new area and will become an invasive species that will provoke an ecological disaster. Here's a simple example. In the 30s in the 20th century, farmers from Australia faced a serious problem. Cane beetles were spoiling sugarcane in the northern part of the country. Insects devoured a huge amount of the harvest, and people couldn't stop it. They didn't want to spoil the cane with poisonous pesticides, so they brought a group of cane toads from South America in the hope that the toads would eat the pests. But when these toads found themselves in the reed fields, they couldn't reach the bugs, as they lived on tall reeds. The toads just couldn't jump at such height and get the pests. So instead of beetles, they began to eat other insects. Amphibians started multiplying at a tremendous rate. The female cane toad can lay about 30,000 eggs at a time. After 3 days, small tadpoles hatch from the eggs. They swim in the water for 20 weeks and then turn into grown-up toads that live from 5 to 10 years. Millions of jumping animals began taking over the entire northern part of the continent, destroying all the biodiversity around. Leaves, grass, insects, carrion. Toads ate all this and didn't leave food for other animals. The problem was that the toads turned out to be very hardy creatures. Heat, cold, rain, droughts, they can breed anywhere and nothing can stop them. But what about other animals? Australia is full of alligators, big birds, and other creatures that would love to feast on croaking amphibians. Yes, it's true. But any animal that tried to eat these toads didn't survive. The problem is that cane toads are venomous. There are special glands behind their eyes that produce strong toxins that cause serious health problems in any animal. Some farmers saw birds falling from the sky after they had swallowed these amphibians. More than 80 years have passed since farmers brought 100 cane toads to Australia. Now, there are about 1.5 billion of them. They have already covered 386,000 square miles, which is about the same area as the states of Texas and Oklahoma combined. And so far, scientists and biologists haven't come up with an effective way to deal with them. People tried to catch them, but it was useless. Even if you catch 98 toads out of 100 next to a small pond, the 2 remaining toads can produce 30,000 eggs per night. Nature may be able to restore balance when some animals with immunity to toad toxins appear in Australia. But at the moment, cane toads are unstoppable. How can we stop the uncontrolled population of mosquitoes that are dangerous to humans? The correct answer is to create 735 million genetically modified mosquitoes and mix these two groups. All over the world, many species of mosquitoes carry infections that cause serious health problems to humans. Almost no one likes mosquitoes. These buzzing insects prevent us from sleeping, and their bites are incredibly itchy. Many people would probably be happy if these creatures disappeared from the face of the earth. And scientists might have found a way to make this wish come true. Only female mosquitoes bite us because they need food to produce eggs. So, scientists released genetically modified male mosquitoes with a special protein in their bodies. After two mosquitoes come into contact, this protein is transmitted from the male to the female and then prevents it from producing offspring. All this happens before the age when females begin to bite. So, females can't create offspring, which means they don't need to bite people and animals anymore. And the more of such proteins scientists spread, the smaller the mosquito population will be. It sounds good, but about 240,000 people have signed a petition to cancel this experiment. Many scientists believe that the disappearance of one insect species can lead to a biological catastrophe. Nature is a complex, balanced system where the slightest change can lead to serious problems. Mosquitoes are a food source for many reptiles and amphibians. The extinction of mosquitoes can trigger the disappearance of many species. It's like a chain reaction of catastrophes, the end of which is unknown. Nevertheless, modified mosquitoes have already been released in Florida, and it seems that nothing terrible has happened. The good news is that people have fewer health problems after that. Moreover, since 2019, about 1.5 billion mosquitoes have been released worldwide. It has saved millions of lives and hasn't disrupted the delicate balance of nature yet. Recently, scientists have released another group of safe mosquitoes in East Africa. Well, let's hope that scientists have everything under control. Invasive species are not always mosquitoes, flies, or amphibians. These can also be large animals, such as feral pigs or super pigs. These pigs are a mix of domestic swine and wild boar. There are already almost 7 million feral hogs in the south of the USA. Thanks to people's efforts, these animals haven't spread to the north yet, but the danger to the northern states comes from Canada. Pigs were brought there in the 80s to support agriculture, but in the early 2000s, wild boars lost their popularity. They just stayed in the wild, and farmers were sure that those animals wouldn't survive the harsh Canadian winter. Oh, how wrong they were. Wild pigs turned out to be hardy, mobile, and capable of rapid reproduction. These animals dig and tear up the ground, eat almost everything they come across, and thus take food from other animals. By the way, other creatures can become their lunch too. Wild pigs attack mice, geese, ducks, and some species of deer. They trample crops, grass, and flowers and are not afraid of anything. They're like natural bulldozers. Any farm is in danger of extinction if it's in the path of thousands of super pigs. And people can't do anything with them. The northern states understand that an invasion is imminent, so they're preparing for a long battle. Super pigs love swampy areas with tall grass. Canadian and American farmers will try to drive them into more open areas and fence those places off. The plan is not perfect, but it can slow the pigs down and save some time.
So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas Fault Line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the big one, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something that can cause more damage than the big one. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put 2 and 2 together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe. Hey, you've heard of Stonehenge? Of course you have. Big rocks mysteriously mounted in circles on a plain in England by, somebody. But what if England's Stonehenge is only a replica of another monument, and its builders just crossed the Atlantic and copied what someone had already done elsewhere? Well, it turns out researchers found another Stonehenge underneath the waters of Lake Michigan. This lake is a hotspot for woo-woo unexplained things. A bunch of disappearances, plane crashes, and now this. An ancient underwater monument that looks strangely enough like Stonehenge. We couldn't help ourselves and needed to dive deep into this story. A ring of massive stones, arranged in a way that felt all too familiar. They saw 2 circles, an outer one and an inner one, sitting 40 feet below the surface. But this wasn't just a random pile of rocks. These stones had been placed there, purposefully, by human hands. And by doing some further research, they discovered that they were staring at a structure that's over 9,000 years old. Think about it. This Stonehenge beneath Lake Michigan predates the pyramids. It predates Stonehenge itself by about 4,000 years. All of this information was enough to startle scientists at Northwestern Michigan University. But that was before they found this out. One of the stones had a carving, a faint but clear petroglyph of a mastodon. Mastodons kind of look like the ancestors to our modern-day elephants, but they have been extinct on planet Earth since 10,000 years ago. So, whoever built this underwater Stonehenge needed to be alive at the same time these creatures roamed our planet. This discovery raised many questions among scientists. I mean, why on earth would they go through all this trouble to lay rocks at the bottom of a lake? Well, first things first. Scientists believe that Lake Michigan had much less water back then than it does now. Second, it could have something to do with ancestral practices of First Nation people. There's one theory from a professor of the University of Michigan. He suggested that the stones formed a kind of prehistoric hunting trap. He believes that early hunters used the circular formation as a drive lane to herd large animals like the mastodons from the rock carvings we were just talking about. Once they got these huge animals into a tighter circle, they could be more easily hunted. But not everyone's convinced by this theory. Some believe the circle probably had a deeper spiritual purpose. According to local Native American tribes, like the Anishinaabe, stones are more than just rocks. They're living beings. They hold spiritual energy and represent a connection to the earth and all living creatures. An elder from the Anishinaabe community even suggested that these stones are sacred, placed there by their ancestors to honor the land and its creatures. Scientists are trying to study the stone formation in depth, like about 40 feet. But that's the problem, actually. The fact that it's underwater makes it super difficult, since they don't have the best technology. Traditional archaeological tools don't work as well when everything is submerged, but promising new technologies like stereophotogrammetry, which literally means making 3D models of a site, are helping scientists study the stone circle more closely. Still, research is slow and expensive, so it's hard to know when this mystery will come to a close. As we said, Lake Michigan is a hot spot for unexplained phenomena. Its lakebed is filled with shipwrecks, such as the Thomas Hume, a sturdy American schooner. It also collects debris from airplanes that have suddenly gone missing while flying the area, such as Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 that disappeared in the 1950s. Some people even call the area the Lake Michigan Triangle, suggesting paranormal activities like what happens in the Bermuda Triangle might be going on. The lake spans over 22,000 square miles, which means it's almost two-thirds the size of the country of Ireland. In 2024, scientists were able to access another one of Lake Michigan's mysteries, the wreck of the Margaret A. Muir schooner. This 130-foot-long sailing ship sank over 130 years ago. The discovery was announced just recently by the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeological Association, the WUAA, whose team found the shipwreck sitting 50 feet below the surface just off the shores of Algoma, Wisconsin. Built in 1872, the Margaret A. Muir was a three-masted schooner built to carry heavy cargo across the Great Lakes. Her final voyage started out as a routine trip. Loaded with bulk salt, the ship left Bay City, Michigan, heading for South Chicago, Illinois. But on September 30th, 1893, things took a bad turn. Just as the Muir approached the town of Annapolis, now known as Algoma, a sudden storm hit. The ship began taking on water fast. The captain of the boat ordered his crew to abandon ship, and thankfully, they all made it to shore safely. For more than a century, the wreck sat undisturbed on the lakebed, its location a mystery. But thanks to a combination of historical research and high-resolution sonar, WUAA searchers finally found her in May of last year. The wreck is remarkably well preserved, with parts of the deck and gear still visible. Well, just a few lakes over to the left, researchers uncovered another impressive thing. At the bottom of Lake Mendota, near Madison, Wisconsin, researchers found 11 ancient canoes. They believe the oldest of the canoes dates all the way back to 2500 BCE. Now, if you don't get why that's important, it's because you're thinking with today's head. If in a classic Midwest highway you see a bunch of pickups, then back in the ancient days you see only canoes. They were the main mode of transportation for indigenous cultures. They were used to fish in deep waters, trade goods, and travel long distances. The reason why scientists were so excited with this discovery is because they had never found any proof of what canoes were being used for in this region back then. And to understand the local cultures that inhabited the area during this time period, they needed to have some information on that. This exciting discovery was announced by the Wisconsin Historical Society in May 2024. The first canoe, which they believe is around 1,200 years old, was pulled from the lake in 2021. Then a second one was dug up in 2022. And now divers have found at least 11 more canoes along what would have been an ancient shoreline, long since submerged. One theory is that these canoes were intentionally sunk to keep them from freezing or warping in winter. It's possible people stored them in the same spot for generations. Or maybe this is just a small part of a much bigger settlement. Historians do believe there could be an ancient village hidden under the water of the lake. Divers have already found stone tools, like net sinkers used for fishing, but the village itself hasn't been located yet. Truth is, while the Great Lakes often steal all the thunder, scientists point out that smaller lakes like Mendota have stories too. The Wisconsin Historical Society is working closely with Native nations to piece together more about the lake's history. You'll need to believe me when I say there is a third Stonehenge, all the way under the waters of Lake Constance, Switzerland. I mean, think of it like Stonehenge's cousin. Archaeologists began to discover this back in 2015, when they found a line of 170 man-made stone cairns under the lake. Scientists say this was most likely the work of several villages, and that the cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose because, well, the formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide, and they can build up to 6 feet. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. So around the time the original Stonehenge was being built. Some of the facts that link them together are their construction dates, as well as the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circular format. Scientists don't know much about this site yet, but hey, I see a pattern manifested all over the world, don't you?
It's a perfect summer day. You're relaxing on the beach, dipping your toes into the cool water, when suddenly, bam! A 56-foot aquatic nightmare rockets from the waves. It's the size of 2 London double-decker buses, sporting about 60 razor-sharp teeth, including bonus chompers on the roof of its mouth, because why not? This aquatic beast isn't picky about its diet either. Sharks? Turtles? Other sea monsters? Yep, they're all on the menu. Meet the mosasaur, a group of marine reptiles that ruled the oceans millions of years ago. If you've seen Jurassic World, you'll recognize them as the stars of that epic moment when a massive creature leaps out of the water to snatch a great white shark like it's sushi. That's a mosasaurus, and it's every bit as terrifying as it sounds. Recently, scientists stumbled upon a fossil of one of those marine monsters in, of all places, Mississippi. Yes, Mississippi, the land of magnolias and catfish. Turns out it's also home to ancient sea dragons. This discovery was a happy accident. A team of geologists was mapping the terrain in east-central Mississippi when they noticed something strange poking out of the ground. It wasn't a rock or a seashell. It was a vertebra, and a massive one. In fact, it was so large it barely fit in the hand of the scientist who found it. The fossil likely belonged to the largest known species of mosasaur, the Mosasaurus hoffmanni. Now, the biggest mosasaur ever found clocked in at a staggering 56 feet long. This new specimen hit a solid 30 feet at least, and while it might not break the world record, it certainly makes the crown for the biggest mosasaur ever discovered in Mississippi. Fun fact, that's still longer than the average RV, and with way worse gas mileage. To be fair, the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science already had a couple of mosasaur fossils in its collection. But this newcomer might just steal the spotlight. And this isn't an isolated incident. In 2015, paleontologists unearthed the skull of a 24-foot-long mosasaur in North Dakota. Years later, a private fossil hunter, yes, that's a thing, found an equally huge mosasaur in Texas. Well, its jaw at least. These sea monsters, also known as sea dragons, by the way, actually have one of the wildest origin stories in paleontology. The very first skull was found way back in 1764 in a chalk quarry in the Netherlands. And at the time, scientists thought it was a whale. Then came a second skull, which was so impressive that French revolutionaries literally looted it during a siege in 1794. Legend has it they swapped it for 600 bottles of wine. Doesn't sound like a fair trade to me. That fossil actually helped pioneer the concept of extinction and got paleontologists buzzing for centuries. Since then, mosasaur fossils have popped up all over the world, like ancient scaly celebrities leaving their mark. From the Mississippi backwoods to the deserts of Morocco, from New Jersey to Belgium, scientists have uncovered everything from teeth to full skulls, sometimes even misplacing them in museum drawers for centuries. So what exactly were these terrifying titans of the deep? Well, let's just say, if ancient oceans had a most likely to eat everything in sight award, the mosasaur would win it. Picture a gigantic scaly torpedo with a mouth full of about 60 razor-sharp teeth, including some growing on the roof of its mouth like dental overkill. It had a long, muscular tail for propulsion and 4 paddle-like limbs that worked like turbocharged oars, letting it cruise through warm, shallow seas like a reptilian speedboat. Scientists believe they were close relatives of modern monitor lizards and snakes, which honestly just makes both of those animals way more terrifying. Some mosasaurs even might have had adaptations for sensing vibrations in the water, allowing them to detect movement from a distance, similar to how sharks use electroreception today. Their eyes were well developed too, giving them sharp vision in the dim ocean depths, a key advantage when hunting fast or elusive prey. But what really makes mosasaurs the stuff of prehistoric nightmares is their attitude. They were apex predators, and they knew it. Those sea monsters weren't picky eaters. Fish, turtles, birds, sharks, other mosasaurs. Basically anything that moved was dinner. Fossilized mosasaur stomach contents prove they practiced family dinner in the most metal way possible. If they were around today, your beach day would be a lot more exciting, and probably shorter. These guys were so intense, they dominated the whole world. It's safe to say, mosasaurs were the undisputed rulers of the late Cretaceous oceans. And like today's orcas or great white sharks, they probably used ambush tactics, sneaking up on prey from below before striking with explosive force. Bite marks found on the fossilized bones of turtles and even other mosasaurs suggest intense underwater battles worthy of a blockbuster movie. But how did one end up in Mississippi of all places? Well, rewind the clock about 80 million years and you'll find part of North America underwater. A vast shallow sea known as the Western Interior Seaway split the continent in two, running from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. It was warm, teeming with life, and yes, crawling with sea monsters. This prehistoric seaway was a watery wonderland. Imagine long-necked plesiosaurs gliding through the water, birds with teeth diving for fish, and oysters the size of car tires clinging to reef-like structures. Even giant fish like this weird guy over here called it home. This ancient inland sea stretched over 600 miles wide in some places, but it was no more than a few hundred feet deep, making it ideal territory for predators like mesosaurs to thrive. The shallow depth also meant that their prey had few places to hide, turning the seaway into a prehistoric buffet. But the Western Interior Seaway wasn't a permanent fixture. As the Rocky Mountains rose, the seaway slowly disappeared. Over millions of years, it transformed from a shallow ocean to swamps and then to dry land. Today, what was once an ocean is now the Midwest, complete with cornfields, cows, and the occasion mosasaur vertebra hiding in the dirt. Now, this wasn't exactly the end of the mosasaurs. Sadly, even these monsters couldn't outswim extinction. Those massive sea beasts met their watery grave around 66 million years ago, when Earth got an unwelcome visitor, a 10-mile-wide asteroid. When that space rock slammed into what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, it unleashed destruction on a planetary scale. The impact triggered massive tsunamis, set forests ablaze, and shot so much debris into the atmosphere that sunlight was blocked out for months. maybe even years. This impact winter plunged Earth into a deep freeze. With sunlight gone, plants couldn't photosynthesize, and the food chain collapsed like a house of cards. On land, plant eaters starved, and predators like T-Rex soon followed. About 75% of all species on Earth disappeared. But don't think the oceans were a safe retreat. The seas were hit just as hard, if not worse. First came the mega tsunami that devastated marine life along coastlines. Then, the real villain arrived. You see, without sunlight, phytoplankton, those tiny microscopic plants that serve as the foundation of the marine food web, perished. With them went zooplankton, small fish and filter feeders. And when the buffet dried up, the big predators like the mosasaurs went hungry. No food, no future. With plunging temperatures and ocean acidification, even the ocean's top predators couldn't survive. Mosasaurs, along with plesiosaurs and ammonites, were wiped out in the blink of a geological eye. So ended the reign of sea monsters. The good news is that you can now swim at peace knowing that no sea dragon will ever come at you. I mean, it's a bummer that they went extinct, but let's be honest. Beach days are way more relaxing without 56-foot lizards crashing the party. Dinosaurs, big ancient bugs, creepy spiders, and scary insects are all cute animals compared to the monsters that lived on Earth about 500 million years ago. For example, here's a creature that swam in the water like a stingray and had 3 eyes. Its mouth was like a pencil sharpener. 2 long claws with forked tips like pinchers protruded from its head, and its gills were somewhere in the back. This is not a thing from a sci-fi movie. This is Mosasaur. Its remains are preserved in excellent condition. Let's look at it more closely and study other similar monsters. The Cambrian Explosion. Remember this name. This period is also called the biological Big Bang, the time when a huge number of different living creatures began to appear in the ocean, large, small, and tiny. The ancestors of almost all modern animal groups were most likely born during the Cambrian Explosion, which lasted from 541 to 485 million years ago. It was a time when the first truly effective and terrifying predators appeared on Earth. One of them was Mosasaur. It's only the size of an index finger, but you would never want to meet such a creature while swimming in the sea. It's scary to imagine what it could do with its pencil sharpener-shaped mouth. And you probably wouldn't be able to hide from it because, come on, it had 2 eyes on the sides and 1 big eye on its forehead. Mosasaur belonged to a group of arthropods. Scientists called it a sea moth since it reminded them of a moth. This thing used a flap-like apparatus similar to wings to float in the water like a stingray. This monster was quite creepy, but its appearance may seem familiar because it's a distant relative of modern spiders, crabs, centipedes, and moths. Scientists found several 506-million-year-old Mosasaur fossils, but unlike many other similar finds, these ones have been preserved in excellent condition. The found fossils showed sharp claws, a toothy jaw, and large gills in the tail section. Some parts of the fossil were so clear that they revealed the details of the creature's internal anatomy, including parts of its nervous and circulatory systems and digestive tract. It had jointed limbs like those of modern insects and crustaceans. When this monster swam in the sea, it probably grabbed its prey with long spiked claws sticking out of its head. Many Mosasaur relatives have claws covered with multiple spikes, which help them grab food. But that ancient creature had smooth claws forked at the tips. That is, it grabbed the prey with those tongs, using them like chopsticks, and then brought it to its mouth. Of course, this is an assumption, and nobody saw how this creature actually did it. Unlike many other similar animals, Mosasaur's posterior segmented body was studded with gills. Scientists don't know why this was necessary, but they assume that such an unusual breathing system helped to adapt to an environment with low oxygen content. Perhaps Mosasaur led a very active reproductive lifestyle that required high oxygen consumption. Creepy, dangerous, and reproducing fast. An excellent set of qualities for one of the most dangerous predators of antiquity. But what did Mosasaur eat? It probably caught different types of worms and small arthropods. It's nice to think that this monster lived so long ago and was so small. But what if this creature was the size of a shark and was swimming in the ocean these days? Perhaps it would become a dominant dweller and people would swim much less along the coast. Mosura lived in the water but was discovered in the Burgess Shale Rock Formation in the Canadian Rockies. Many mountains on Earth were once the seabed inhabited by strange creatures. One of them was Opabinia. It had 5 eyes, a mouth facing backward, a long trunk and claws instead of a nose. Wait, what? It's too strange even for science fiction, even for outer space. In its eccentricity, Opabinia was perhaps the loneliest creature on Earth. Scientists couldn't find another species that would be similar to this individual until recently. Meet Utaurora. It seems to belong to the same species as Opabinia. Its inch-long body was divided into 14 to 15 furrows. Each of them ended in a pointed flap. Opabinia had the same body, but it's unlikely that both monsters were friends. The difference between their timelines was several million years. It's hard to imagine why these monsters needed such strange body structures. Why haven't modern filmmakers used the design of those animals to create cool space monsters yet? Okay, they were creepy creatures, but what about weird and kinda useless ones? Scientists have discovered Su, a legless creature with no head turned inside out. Huh? This 444 million year old creature was found in South Africa, north of Cape Town. They called it Su after the discoverer's mother. In fact, it's some kind of new arthropod species that may have lived in low oxygen waters. This creature was turned inside out, and the outer shell with the legs and head was lost. Thanks to mineralization, muscles, tendons, and even Su's intestines were preserved on the fossil. It's a great success to find such detailed remains of an ancient creature. However, scientists still can't determine the evolutionary history of this species. They're sure that it was a primitive marine arthropod. Okay, we can see that 500 million years ago, Earth was filled with creepy monsters, which fortunately are now extinct. But what about trees? Were they the same as we see now? Or was there something else? Something creepy? Oh yeah. Scientists have discovered a new kind of living organism similar to a tree or a mushroom. It was gigantic and had a very minimalistic design. Meet the Prototaxites. It's basically just a big stick with a round end poking out of the ground. It was smooth, didn't have the usual tree bark, and looked more like a mushroom without a cap. But scientists have recently found out that it wasn't a mushroom at all. Prototaxites probably belonged to a previously unknown branch of life. Prototaxites is considered to be the first giant organism in the history of the planet that lived on land. It existed about 420 to 375 million years ago during the Devonian period. It was the time when plants began to spread across dry land, forming large forests. Over time, they began to grow leaves and form roots in the ground. Then, the first seed plants appeared. The real colonization of land began. The first arthropods, such as centipedes, arachnids, and other unpleasant creatures, began to walk among those forests. Meanwhile, the water was filled with a huge biodiversity. There was a giant supercontinent on the planet, and smaller parts began to break off it. During this period, Prototaxites towered over the land. Some of these things reached 26 feet high and 3 feet wide. It's like a 3-story house and as thick as a palm tree. But what was it? A plant? A mushroom? Algae, perhaps? Scientists discovered them in the middle of the 19th century, but only in 2007 did they conduct chemical analysis. Research showed that it was most likely a giant mushroom, but in 2025, scientists refuted this conclusion. It turns out this may have been an unknown life form that existed separately from the kingdom of fungi, animals, plants, and protists. Scientists noticed that the inner part of Prototaxites consisted of a number of tubes. There are similar tubes inside mushrooms, but the tubes of that ancient living thing branched and joined differently. They even had a different chemical composition. The main building block of mushrooms is chitin. But the prototaxides contained chemicals similar to lignin, a substance found in the bark of trees and other plants. And its anatomy differs from the structure of any other organism known to us. What were they doing on Earth? Just chilled and enjoyed the bloom of life? Did they produce some kind of fruit, like a banana with eyes and claws? Scientists don't know. What if it was something that was brought to Earth from outer space? What if they were flowers planted by another civilization? What do you think? It was the largest fish our Earth had ever seen, and its bite was strong enough to crush a car. The largest of its teeth found was the length of a remote control. It consumed about 2,500 pounds of food a day. That's like 3,300 cans of tuna for you. The earliest megalodon fossils are from about 20 million years ago, but you won't see its skeleton, and that's because the mighty Meg had no bones. A skeleton made from bones gives most animals their body shape and strength. Sharks, though, come from the same subclass as rays, skates, and sawfish and have cartilage instead of bones. Cartilage is a tissue that is softer and more flexible than bones, but it's still tough enough to shape the body and protect the internal organs. Some areas are more flexible, since cartilage is weaker, and some, like the shark's head, are much tougher thanks to calcified cartilage. Their snouts, though, are made of really soft and flexible cartilage to work like a bumper in case of a collision with some dangers. Who knows if they'd be able to do all this with a heavy skeleton? Plus, cartilage makes their jaws more flexible, and they can open their mouths much wider than they would with a jaw made of bone. Our hero, Meg, was no exception, and it had the strongest bite of all living creatures, which was also made possible by a skeleton made of cartilage. Sharks take full advantage of their cartilage. It helps them swim and turn fast while hunting. One drawback of this type of skeleton is that it was really tricky for scientists to establish the shape and size of Meg. Normally, they would do it using fossilized bone skeletons or their parts. With Meg, they had to guess based on the teeth they found and comparisons with living relatives. A more recent 3D computer model was based partially on scans of a preserved spine discovered in the 1860s. The model showed that Meg was bigger, faster, and even hungrier than scientists had previously thought. Looks like an average megalodon was 52 feet long. That's slightly bigger than the height of the Hollywood sign and weighed 10 times as heavy as an elephant. There were also much bigger creatures. Scientists still aren't sure how the megalodon got this size. The fact that there were bigger and smaller Megs probably has to do with a little something called Bergmann's rule. It says that the temperature of the surrounding environment affects the animal's body size because they either need to conserve or shed heat. The megalodons that reached cooler waters probably needed more body weight to make sure they survived in low temperatures. Those living in warmer waters had to be smaller to avoid burning up. If the researchers were correct in their calculations, it also means that Meg reached a cruising speed of over 3 miles per hour, which is much faster than other sharks. The still-living great white shark can cover a distance of nearly 7,000 miles without stopping, which is 9/10 as long as the diameter of Earth. It looks like the megalodon could have gone much further. Megalodons managed to survive on our planet for nearly 70 times longer than humans have. They were roaming the oceans for around 20 million years, and you could see them pretty much anywhere except near the poles. Scientists discovered the most northern fossils off the coast of Denmark and the most southern in New Zealand. The reason why there were no megalodon teeth found in Antarctica is most likely that these adapted to only warm tropical and subtropical waters. The younger ones like to keep to the shores, while full-grown adults preferred coastal areas, but they could easily move into the open ocean as well. When our planet went through a period of global cooling and drying, and the seas began to freeze around 3.6 million years ago, there was less and less room for Meg to thrive. Much of their prey, like smaller whales, seals, and sea turtles, disappeared or relocated to waters that were too cold for our hero. And at the same time, the number of its natural competitors Like smaller predatory sharks, like the great white shark, and whales increased. This shifting food chain dynamics could have been even more dangerous for the Meg than the cold ocean water. You're used to seeing them on the big screen as heartless monsters, but these huge sharks were actually loving and caring family guys. Scientists discovered several megalodon nursery areas in Florida, Maryland, Panama, and off the coast of Spain. It looks like they gave birth to their young in shallow water environments. Then, little Megs would stay there with adults protecting and raising them until they were ready to fight off predators. The mighty Meg had 276 teeth in 5 rows in its mouth. Similar to other sharks, it was fast in replacing its worn-out or lost teeth. With 4 or 5 rows of teeth in its mouth, it basically acted like a conveyor belt, able to grow back damaged or missing teeth. This means that an adult megalodon probably would have grown several thousand teeth throughout its lifetime. Although the great white shark is often mentioned as Meg's closest relative, they'd hardly be distant cousins. The ancestors of today's great white existed at the same time as the Meg, but they weren't best friends and even rivaled each other. The great white shark wouldn't win in a head-to-head fight with a Meg, but it was a better hunter using its smaller size and agility to snap up the giant's prey quickly. This only left the bigger fish and whales for the Meg, but its food supplies began to run out as the whales swam to the cooler new seas. Rather than a great white, the megalodon is more like a modern bull shark. It had a short snout, a flat lower jaw, and huge pectoral fins to support its massive weight and size. We also speak of Meg as an extinct giant, but can we be 100% sure it isn't hiding somewhere as we speak? After all, we've only explored 5% of our oceans altogether. The Mariana Trench is the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, and you could dip the whole of Mount Everest in its deepest part, and over a mile of it would still be above the surface. If a megalodon or two needed a place to hide, that would be the perfect spot. It wouldn't be the coziest place to live, though, with its cold water and total darkness. Plus, the pressure there is 1,000 times stronger than at sea level. So, if a Meg really were hiding down there, it would have serious issues with its teeth, because calcium would dissolve under that pressure. To survive here, it would also need to learn to navigate in complete darkness. That means it would have either become bioluminescent or evolve to grow massive eyes like the giant squid. If the Meg were still around and true to its dietary choices, it would have to eat smaller fish, and that would be a problem for us humans. Especially those of us who love fish, that is. And the ocean isn't cooling down these days. The megalodon would love its temperature and would thrive and reproduce faster than ever. Those giants would create some massive problems for cargo ships and cruising vessels. In case you're now scared at the thought of meeting a megalodon, relax. Most scientists don't think it's possible because of our hero's size. Most foods that megalodons like to eat live in shallow ocean areas and not in the deep, deep sea. Meg would need to come up for dinner every now and then, and it's kinda hard to miss a creature this big. They're both giant prehistoric creatures to us, but the megalodons and the dinosaurs never actually coexisted. The dinosaurs probably died out about 66 million years ago. Megalodons seem to have appeared a bit later.
Oh man, the sun did it again. It just blasted a huge cloud of plasma into space. This time, it was one of the fastest and most powerful eruptions of this solar cycle. It was so strong that the shockwave hit Venus, our next-door neighbor. That's when scientists got worried and started asking a scary question. Could Earth be next? Well, let's just cut to the chase. If your GPS and internet have been working fine over the last few weeks, and your city hasn't had any big blackouts lately, you already know the answer. No, that powerful blast didn't hit Earth. Or at least we didn't feel any real effects from it, because this event happened in October 21st, 2025, and if our planet had been in its path, we would have felt the effects only a few days after that date. You see, we're talking about coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. From time to time, the sun throws a giant cloud of superhot plasma into space. straight from its outer layer, the corona. Think of plasma as a superheated gas. It's what the sun is made of, and it's full of tiny charged particles, positive ions and negative electrons. These outbursts happen because the sun's magnetic field is always moving and twisting. Sometimes the magnetic lines get tangled up, then suddenly snap and reset. This process is known as a magnetic reconnection. And when that happens, boom, the sun launches a CME. A single coronal mass ejection can throw billions of tons of material into the solar system in one shot. And it can create a shock wave. That shock wave can speed up charged particles, which raises the chance of a radiation storm. And if a planet is in the way, yeah, that can be trouble. The tricky part is that CMEs are pretty unpredictable. They can blast out in different directions, and they don't all move at the same speed. The fastest ones race through space at millions of miles per hour. If one is aimed at Earth, it can get here in as little as 15 hours. Slowest ones can take days to get here, but even then, it's usually somewhere between 1 and 5 days. It's not like months. Since this big blast happened a while ago, it's safe to say that, well, we're safe. And honestly, even if it had hit Earth, we'd probably be safe anyway. Sure, a strong CME can mess with satellites, disrupt radio and internet signals, and even knock out power grids for a while. But it's not the kind of thing that ends the world or wipes out humanity. So take a breath. Even a really powerful solar eruption isn't going to destroy Earth. Unfortunately, we can't say the same thing about Venus. CMEs hitting our neighboring planet are actually one of the reasons Venus can't support life, at least not what we consider life. But don't worry, we'll get to that part later. First, let's dive into this recent solar outburst and what made it so extreme. This one came from the far side of the sun, the side we can't see from Earth, and it came from an especially active sunspot area called 4246. This is a new, huge, messy sunspot that's been responsible for the latest round of solar storms headed our way. The big blast happened right after that region rotated past the sun's western edge, so it was out of view from Earth and from most weather satellites. Thankfully, the event was caught by an instrument on a NOAA satellite called CCOR-1. Think of it like a special camera designed to spot big solar blasts even when they happen on the far side of the sun. That's why it's strategically placed so high above Earth, and it orbits about 22,000 miles over the equator. The CCOR-1 manages to capture those images by blocking the sun's blinding surface, so it can see the faint glow around it and track huge plasma clouds as they spread out into space. Now, let's talk about speed. NASA estimates that the CME in October was moving at about 820 miles per second. But the first radio signal suggested it might have been even faster, close to 1,537 miles per second. Trust me, that's crazy fast for a coronal mass ejection. To put that in perspective, only a handful of blasts in modern history have been quicker. One famous example happened in 2017 during an X-class flare rated around X8. So according to NASA, X-class means the strongest kind of solar flare. The number tells you how strong it is. An X1 is the baseline, an X2 is twice as strong, an X3 is 3 times as strong, and so on. So yeah, an X8 flare is something huge. Back on Earth, that 2017 event did mess a bit with high-frequency radio signals for a while. But for us, that was pretty much it. Mars was a different story. When the same event hit the red planet, it heated the upper atmosphere in an uneven way. In the hottest areas, scientists saw the top 2 layers, the thermosphere and the ionosphere, start interacting more than usual because of the blast, and that had a real effect. Oxygen began escaping into space much faster than normal. In other words, that brief event made Mars lose part of its atmosphere at a higher rate. Now, when we talk about this recent burst, the story is kind of similar, but with a twist. This time, Mars wasn't the main target, Venus was. The planet was sitting right in the path of the solar burst, So when the blast hit, Venus got slammed with a storm of charged particles. Now you might be wondering, why is it a bigger problem when a solar eruption hits planets like Venus or Mars, but not as big of a deal for us here on Earth? Well, it's because of Earth's magnetic field. So big blasts from the sun can mess with the atmosphere around a planet. But on Earth, a lot of that impact gets blocked by a natural magnetic bubble called the magnetosphere. Good thing, huh? Here's how it works. A wave of plasma comes from the sun and slams into the magnetosphere, the region around Earth controlled by our magnetic field. That magnetic field pushes most of the charged particles away, kind of like a shield, but not all of them. Some particles still sneak through and crash into the upper atmosphere. When that happens, we can get geomagnetic storms. These storms create amazing auroras. They can also mess with satellites and communication networks, like we talked about earlier. But some planets, like Venus, don't have a strong magnetic field like Earth does, and that can be bad news. Because when a CME wave reaches Venus, the charged particles crash straight into the atmosphere and, over time, slowly peel parts of it away. Now here's a real example. On December 19, 2006, the Sun released a small, slow CME. Even though it wasn't moving fast, it was still strong enough to do damage. About 4 days later, it reached Venus and ripped away a large amount of oxygen from the planet's atmosphere, sending it off into space for good. Or bad. And this is actually one of the big reasons why planets like Venus are uninhabitable. Without a strong magnetic field, CMAs can slowly strip away their atmosphere, blast the surface with dangerous radiation, and create brutal space weather conditions. Venus is a perfect example. It is the hottest planet in our solar system, being 100 times hotter than Earth. Its atmosphere is insanely thick, and the pressure over there is insane, so much so that the longest any spacecraft has survived on its surface before being crushed is a little over 2 hours. Scientists think that getting hit by solar eruptions without a proper magnetosphere to protect it helped push Venus toward this extreme world. And by studying what happens to planets like Venus, we can learn something bigger: how important a magnetic shield might be for life on other worlds we find outside our solar system.
The country's authorities are hiding something from you. They don't want ordinary people to ever find out the truth. You can see a lot of fake photos and false locations on the internet, but almost none of them are true. So what secret are they keeping? You definitely don't expect to hear this. They're hiding a tree. But it's not just a tree. Money grows on its branches. Can you believe it? Of course not, it's a joke. But the truth is, America does protect the oldest tree in the world, and its name is Methuselah. You can Google it and you will find a lot of fake pictures and some old gnarled aspens. Real photos of Methuselah are quite rare, and its location remains a mystery to this day. It's known to grow somewhere along the Methuselah Trail in the Inyo National Forest in California. It's a bristlecone pine tree, and its age is more than 4,600 years. Imagine how cool it would be to touch the trunk of that tree and feel all those thousands of years of history. Only it's not cool. This is the reason why the country is hiding its location. If thousands of tourists touched the tree and picked up small pieces of its branches, it wouldn't last even a month. Many trees in this area are pretty weak right now and suffering from drought and all kinds of bad insects. So Methuselah is also in danger. Don't touch or approach it, even if you find out the location. The tree was discovered by dendrochronologist Edmund Shulman. A dendrochronologist is a scientist who studies the rings of ancient trees. But more on that later. So Shulman discovered the tree in the middle of the previous century, and over the past 50 years, it has become shrouded in rumors and legends. But how did Shulman know it was the oldest? In 1957, he took a core sample and studied the tree's annual rings. You see, every year, a layer forms inside a tree, resembling a ring. But scientists don't cut the trunk, don't worry. They extract a piece as thick as a pencil, and that's enough. The more layers, the older the tree is. So, Shulman counted Methuselah's rings and found out that it's been growing for more than 4,600 years. This means it's even older than ancient giant redwoods, which were considered the oldest trees on the planet. In 1958, Shulman told the story about the existence of Methuselah and posted its photo in National Geographic. From that moment on, the tree became popular. Many people wanted to pluck a cone or twig from it, so the authorities forbade publishing information about the location of the tree. Later, other scientists examined Methuselah's rings and suggested it could be younger, though some rings were too faint or damaged to count. In any case, it remains the most ancient tree on Earth, officially confirmed that is. But it wasn't always like this. Back in 1964, a geographer, Donald R. Curry, stumbled upon a tree called Prometheus, which was about 5,000 years old. And you know what he did? He just cut it down. There are many theories about why he did it. The tool for getting core samples was broken, or this guy didn't know how to use it, but the result was sad. The tree didn't survive. Hopefully nothing like this will happen to Methuselah and it will live a long life. But why are scientists so worried about it? Yeah, it can tell a lot about the history of our planet. But is there another reason? There's a theory that this tree could live forever if no one cut it down, and droughts or parasites didn't destroy it. So basically, Methuselah's like nature's fountain of youth. Imagine if we could use that trick on people. Okay, now we know what the US hides, but do you know what Australia keeps secret? Not just a tree, but an island. Even if you were allowed to visit the island, it wouldn't be easy for you to get there. The island is located between Australia and Antarctica, somewhere in the middle of the ocean. But it's unlikely that you would get such permission. The fact is that Heard Island is completely untouched by humans, and Australia wants to keep it that way. You'll find little reliable information about this island on the internet. All we know is that the island has 2 active volcanoes, Australia's tallest mountain, and several glaciers. But you know what the coolest thing is? It's home to animals you won't find anywhere else. The island's closed ecosystem preserves creatures that might have never seen people. The next island is quite famous and is located in Brazil. The authorities don't keep it a secret, but they protect it from tourists. Even if you had permission to visit this place, you probably wouldn't want to. This is Snake Island, and its name speaks for itself. This piece of land contains the largest concentration of venomous snakes in the world. Those are golden lancehead pit vipers. One bite of this snake is critically dangerous for a person. The snakes are all over the place there and have almost no competition from other animals. Only specialists capable of handling these reptiles can visit the island. Lots of secret places stay off limits because humans can mess them up without meaning to. It's not that we're bad, it's just that even being there can change tiny invisible parts of nature. And here's a great example of the kind of destruction we can trigger. You've all seen photos of ancient cave paintings with horses and bulls. One of the most famous of such caves is the Lascaux Cave, which is located in France. On the walls inside the cave, people found more than 600 drawings and about 1,500 engravings. The 20,000-year-old drawings depicted different animals. Scientists opened the cave to the public, and this led to a disaster. Too many people came to see the cave, and it messed up the cave's ecosystem. Then a fungus showed up and started spreading over the walls, ruining the old drawings. It was a tragedy for the scientific world. The cave was quickly closed to visitors. Now, only a small group of archaeologists can enter it. No one knows when or if the cave will open again. Those glimpses of human history from the first European settlements might be lost to the public forever. Our next secret location is in Svalbard, Norwegian archipelago. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a massive storage vault that can keep 4.5 million seeds of different types. The authorities say that the seeds are stored there to preserve the population in case of a local disaster. But a lot of people think they're tucked away for the apocalypse, ready to help us replant Earth if everything goes wrong. But why, of all countries, did people decide to store seeds here? Because of Svalbard's cold, dry climate. The weather conditions here are ideal for seed preservation. The vault is well guarded, it's classified, and no one can get inside except for authorized persons. All our secret places are connected with nature. An island, a forest, a cave. But how about finishing the video in the city? It's in plain sight, but it hides a secret room that is impossible to enter. In Atlanta, Georgia, inside a museum with top-notch security, the secret Coca-Cola recipe sits locked away in a massive safe. What? Yes, this is probably one of the most guarded secrets in the world. Money, diamonds, ancient artifacts. None of them get the kind of protection a single sheet of paper with the Coke recipe does. This secret has been kept there for more than 125 years. The unique storage design and security system make burglary almost impossible. You can visit a specialized museum and see the door to the vault, but nothing else. Sure, it sounds a little crazy to guard a single piece of paper, but then again, this drink has made the company billions. Coca-Cola has been one of the world's favorite drinks for over a century, and it's still raking in massive profits.